All right. Looks like it's recording. Yeah, okay, we're connecting. So, sans camera today. I can't figure out why my camera is blue screening this particular computer. So you can't see my beautiful face. But this is Michael Pavlovich, and let's Google ketchup packets. So basically, what I'm looking for, we'll do a couple fun things today, I think. Of course, I'll answer questions if you have any. But I'm going to go through here. Let's go ahead and just grab this plain old tomato ketchup packet. We'll go ahead and say save image as, and I'm just going to dump this right on my desktop. It's a WebP. Let's go ahead and convert that. Double click. Save as. JPEG. Something recognizable, but you know what? I never actually tested it. I don't think WebP is recognizable by ZBrush just yet. So desktop here, save it. So now let's go ahead and make that real quick. And like I said, we'll make some other fun stuff, but we'll start with something easy. So good morning, Manga. Let's see, texture, import. We're gonna make a ketchup packet. How exciting is that? Let's see, that was this one here. So we got the texture imported, and you can just use this as a guide if you wanted to. So there's a couple different ways you can do that. Let's do it this way. So I'm going to go in here and we're going to select a plane, drag it on our canvas, go here into edit mode, and now we just have an editable plane. I want to sculpt on it, so I'm going to go in here and say make Polymesh 3D. Yeah, we're sculpting ketchup today. Yeah, I had a good Thanksgiving. How was yours, John? I can't complain. So if I wanted to, I have my texture loaded. I can go in here and say texture. I can select this one, say add it to my spotlight. I can make it bigger or smaller. I can turn down the opacity here. Actually, let me open up some links for you all, just because I'm not going to go fast or anything, but I always go fast. Who am I kidding? If you want, I'll give the usual spiel. If you want to know more, here is a link to my YouTube, and then here there's a intro to ZBrush. That'll have all your intro stuff, like Spotlight, I think. If not, you can just Google Spotlight. Spotlight reference, let's say. So you could use this just to go through here and say, okay, this is the size I want it. You could even paint the texture on it, which we might do in just a second. That's one way to go about this. Or we have the texture loaded. We can go in here to our texture map, select it, and just select it, and it'll add our texture to this polyplane here. Now, right now, this texture looks okay. If you needed to, you can go in here to Polypaint and say, hold down Shift. I think it's hold down Shift and say Polypaint from texture. That'll actually change the aspect ratio. It did it slightly. You could see it slightly adjusted. It also looks very low res. That's because we technically filled the pixels of this plane with the texture map, so the texture's off now. But if I turn texture on, now it'll show the texture. And in fact, we have our startup material here. We can switch this to like Skin Shader 4 or even flat color, and that'll just be the bright, just the plain old version of what we're trying to model here. So that's one way you can apply an image to a plane. However, if I want to go through here and like actually I probably could. I can turn on polyframe here. You can hold down Control Shift and go through and just slice where you want to, cut this plane. In order to do that so I can see it a little bit better, what I'm going to do is transfer this Polypaint. Now that I've changed the aspect ratio of this plane to match, so now this is exactly what I want it to look like, I can now go in here and I can, again, if I go through and say, okay, Polypaint from texture now, at first it's going to say I have to turn on mRGB, or you can just do RGB if you want, I think. Polypaint from texture. Jeez, is it going to make me? Polypaint from texture. Let's go into subtool here. We have colorize on. Let's go ahead and turn texture off. Okay, so basically it's filling, it's using that texture and filling. I just don't have enough geometry. So what I need to do is go in here to geometry. I'm going to turn out the smooth modifier. That'll keep it from the, not that really matters in this case, but if you wanted to keep these corners from getting soft, you can turn that smooth modifier off and then just hit divide, 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 divide. And up here, actually yours will be up here, but up here is 1,000,000 points. That should be plenty. I am new. I just started. I don't know where to start. Can you suggest? Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is my suggestion. I might be biased because I literally made this, but here's an intro to ZBrush, new and updated, and then here's a whole bunch of what's new on that YouTube link. So if you go through here, and I'm just going to middle click here, here is this entire intro series. I want to say it's like 50 the videos. You can just go through them. You don't have to go through all of them. I'd say go through like the first 5. That'll get you the basics, and then from there, I don't know, have fun. You know, Googling other stuff. So there's that. And also, if you want to see more project-based, it's all on here. You can go through my YouTube channel and go to videos, or actually there's a whole playlist here, live stream full episodes, all the little weird live streams we've done. And then also on here, if you go to the ZBrush What's New, here's all the what's new from past the intro videos. There's a bunch of stuff in here you can go through and be like, what was in 2020? You can go in here and here's 41 videos on all the 2020 stuff. So you can check that out. Just a couple resources there. Now, so we've subdivided this up. So now when I go in here, and I say Polypaint from texture, now it's got tons of polygons, and now my Polypaint is very, very sharp. So that's cool. Now we're going to go in here to geometry. I'm going to say delete lower because we're going to be slicing through this and I don't want subdivisions on here. So now if I turn on polyframe, you're going to see a bunch of little tiny squares on here. You can actually turn off line, and now you just see the polygroup. So now we can go. Sorry, this is a long involved thing. It'll get faster as we go through, but I'm gonna hold down Control Shift, switch to slice curve, and I can literally just slice where I want this ketchup packet to be cut out. And in fact, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna say these intentional stress risers that are on the top of this packet, I'm gonna go ahead and cut those off because I'll create those later. But I just wanna get the overall shape of this here. And another thing we can do, I'm not sure where we are in space actually. Let's turn on our floor. Oh, we're upside down, and we're Z forward here, and then we're X left to right. So if I go through here, well, you can always fix that in just a second. If I go through and I do a geometry, modify topology, modify topology, I can do a mirror and weld across the X, and that will actually mirror my slices. So now we're right down the middle of that middle axis. If that's useful to you, that's totally fine. And essentially what we have, if we go in here and we go back to subtool and we turn off our colorize, that little paintbrush icon, now we have that perfectly cut out sliced area that is the exact size of the ketchup packet that we want. Do you need to be that specific? Maybe, maybe not. I'll leave that up to you. Another thing we can do, I don't know if you can really see it, but on a ketchup packet, it's kind of like stamped on the left and the right and the top and the bottom. And in fact, the top and the bottom have these little like lines that go across. So let's go ahead and build that in too, because that's kind of important. The ketchup resides right here in an inflated little middle section. So we want to capture that. So I'm going to say Control Shift Tap this middle polygroup here to isolate it, and then geometry, modify topology, delete hidden. So this will just be again, it's just geometry on this is just reference on a plane here. The texture isn't great, but we can reapply that later. So we're going to hold down Control Shift Slice Curve. I'm going to turn on polyframe, turn off line, and on the top here, I'm going to say right about here is where that ketchup gets, the ketchup packet gets stamped, and then right over here as well. And then right along the bottom here. So again, if we want to flip that to the other side, we can do a geometry, modify topology, mirror and weld across the X. Here's my custom menu, so I don't have to go searching for that. If I use it a lot, I don't want to search for it all the time, right? If you want to know more about that, speaking of, right in here somewhere, if we do Control F, custom and brushes, custom interface and menus, video 42 in that intro series. I'll show you how to do that. So now, we have the middle inflated area here on our plane, and then we have the outside stamped area. So let's hold down Control Shift to isolate that middle polygroup, Control Shift drag with drag rect, and then Control W to make this all one polygroup. So now we have a flat plane with a middle section. Wow, Mike, that's amazing. Well, let's use that to our advantage. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to turn off polyframe so you can see what we're doing. So now I want to keep our polygroups here, but I want to get better geometry. Right now, it's just a bunch of two high-res squares. So let's go ahead and have ZRemesh do some heavy lifting for us. We're going to go in here to Geometry, ZRemesh. We're going to say half. For our poly count, I don't know how many this is, 391,000. Actually, maybe instead of half, we'll just drag this down to like 5,000. Depth size down to 0. We want nice, even quads. And the most important thing is we want to keep our groups. We don't need to smooth them. They're already sliced and smooth. So we just turn that smooth down to 0. So now we can use ZRemesh. It'll go through and actually, I'm going to turn on X symmetry. It's already symmetrical, so if I tap X on my keyboard, which will activate symmetry across the X by default, if you want to change those axes, you can do that here. When I ZRemesh, it'll make it perfectly symmetrical. So that's going to say, okay, you want 5,000 polygons instead of 300,000. And it's still too much. So this is where it might go in here and say half, and then just keep hitting ZRemesh half, 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 half. And then there we go. Now, I want to give this thing some thickness. A bunch of different ways we can do that. We can go in here to dynamic, turn off smooth subdiv, and then just go in here and just add some fake thickness like this. And if you want to keep the polygroup, that's a really good way to do it. Then you can just say dynamic apply, and now you have that thickness built in. Now just be careful. If you go in here and turn on dynamic again, it'll add more thickness. So in this case, you might want to turn down thickness and turn up your smooth subdivs, and maybe go in here and say crease PG, crease your polygroups or whatever. That's one way you can do that. I'm going to undo through that just to show you what can happen. So now it's single-sided. So when I go to the back, it disappears, right? If that bothers you, you can go down here to display properties, turn on double, and now you can see the back. Just be careful with that. That can sometimes trip you up. But actually, let me move this. I'm distracted by my own ZBrushing here. So I'm going to go through here. Like one thing we can do, BZM, that'll activate your ZModeler brush. Say OK. So B is just brush menu, and then Z narrows it down. All the brushes start with Z, and then there's ZModeler brushes M. So just BZM. Hover over a face, hold down spacebar. QMesh, to make it easier to understand, we'll say extrude all polygons. So now when I pull this out, we'll get thickness, but I'm losing my polygroups here, right? Like I said, we could use our dynamic thickness, or I'll show you a little trick. We can go down here to morph target, store it, hit W on our keyboard so we can grab that gizmo, and just move this out a little bit, just basically the thickness that you want to store, and then say create diff mesh. So whenever you do that with any mesh, that'll create a morph diff, and you're going to see, hey, we got polygroups on both sides, and we have thickness. So pretty cool. I want to make this polygroup here. You're going to see this red polygroup, and this one's a little different. I'm going to Control-Shift-Tap this one, Control-Shift-Drag to invert that visibility, Control-Shift-Tap that one. I want to maintain these edge polygroups. Those will be useful later. So I'm going to Control-Shift-Drag, hit Control-W to make these both. So if I undo that, these are both slightly different. If I hit Control-W with them visible, that'll make them the exact same. So now if I want to hit W and then like Control-Tap this polygroup, it'll unmask just those two polygroups here. That'll be important in just a second. We're basically going to inflate this middle section and leave this outer stamped flat section alone. Oh, you know what? I don't know when the streamers actually happen, but I can give you a link to what would be ZBrush Live. Nope. Not live Boolean. Live streaming your favorite ZBrush artist daily. Wait for it. It's being a little slow. There it is. Sure. Stream chat. Featured recent trending ZBrush Master Summit. I thought it was in here. Calendar. There it is. Switch over there. There you go. You can see, am I even on here? Thursday or Saturday? Oh, I'm already been kicked off because it's today. Here's calendar. Can you tell me one thing? Why sometimes our subtools after restarting, the point count gets low after applying a Dynamesh at the same count as time of saving the. Okay, so you're saying like I'm in a ZBrush session here, and when I go through here and I say I want a Dynamesh at a resolution of 176. And then hit Dynamesh, and then it's like, okay, that's the resolution I want. You save ZBrush, you open it back up, and you're like, okay, great, I want a Dynamesh at 176 or whatever, and it Dynameshes at a different resolution. That's a little weird. Dynamesh should be, it's kind of like scale based. So for instance, if I go through here and I say, okay, I want to, let's keep it at 128. I want a Dynamesh at 128 here. So I Dynamesh. For everyone else, so Dynamesh will be geometry. Dynamesh is basically just turns your mesh into clay. But if I go through here and I scale this way up, and then I say Dynamesh at 128, it's still the same resolution. It's just packed more in there. In fact, now that I'm saying all this, let me give you a video here. Dynamesh. So there's actually a new option for Dynamesh objects. So this will actually go through as a copy link address. This is a way you can kind of control squeezing a little more geometry out of your Dynameshes if you need to. That should stay the same. I'm not sure why that's doing that, but one thing you can do if you want to be very consistent, you can go in here to you can download Dynamesh utility, and you can go through here, go into additional options, turn on use autoscaler, and you can set this poly count to exactly the poly count you want, and it'll Dynamesh to that poly count. So if you're having trouble maintaining that scale, which I don't think should be the case, the other thing too is to check is this little dot over here. If you turn that, if you did open circle to get more resolution, and then you restarted ZBrush and your subtool should maintain that setting though. So I don't know why that would be turning off, but I don't know, something to look at, I guess. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for that. Dynamics to inflate. Exactly. I think that'll work great. So let's do what John says. So we have our thickness here. We have Control Shift. We have our polygroups on both sides. So I want to inflate this middle section here. So let's go in here to our dynamics. And in here, we can say inflate. And you can put that inflate amount on whatever you want. Now, if I don't want to inflate this outer section, I'm going to isolate this one. Control tap in my canvas. So here's all the masking stuff. You go to here, I'm just doing the hotkeys, but Control tap the mask, Control Shift tap to bring everything else back, and then Control tap to invert that mask. Now just this middle section is unmasked, and now we can go through here and we'll turn off gravity, we'll turn off floor collision, we don't need any of that. And then with this inflate modifier, we can run the simulation, and it'll basically just inflate that middle section here. Now, it did what we wanted. I just want a little bit more resolution. I'm actually going to switch back our material here to I don't know, Madcap Gray, I guess. I want more resolution. Now, just like we did before, let me switch here, just so you can see a little bit better. I'm going to go through here, and just like we did, I'm going to say geometry divide, and I'm going to turn off that smooth. If I don't turn off the smooth modifier and I divide it, it'll kind of average all my verts. It's not a huge deal in this case, but I don't want that. So I'm going to say turn off the smooth modifier temporarily. I'm going to hit divide, divide, divide. I don't know, maybe up to, 55,000 seems right. It doesn't look like it changed anything, but there is actually more geometry packed in. If you turn off polyframe and turn it back on, you'll see, more polygroups. So again, mask, invert, and then with this unmasked here, if we go through here and we inflate, it'll still inflate, but now I get a little bit more resolution. And you can just keep letting it run. In fact, if you want it, that's an overpacked ketchup packet here. But if you want to, you can even do expand and inflate, and that'll actually give you even more leeway. It'll start like wrinkling up as it expands. So if you want to get more of a result like this, if you want to do like a sci-fi inflated insulation or something like that, you could use that. Also, if we go to hit W on our keyboard and we try to like, okay, let's go to unmask mesh center to go right in the middle of our unmasked object here. If we go through and we scale this out, it'll scale, but it's just basically going to move those points out. However, if we go here to B for brush, T to narrow it down to our transpose brushes, which our move brush is, there is a transpose cloth in here. That's BTA. So if I hit BTA on our keyboard, let's go and turn off expand. While I'm scaling out, it'll actually be simulating cloth and inflating at the same time. So I can go through here, and instead of using just hitting run simulation, I can control this a little bit better by just going in here and just inflating. So now we got a nice little midsection here. It's nice and inflated. Now you could, like I said, you could turn on expand and get wrinkles, but it's also pretty easy just to get wrinkles. So we've got our reference here. If you wanted, you could put this like just hanging out behind, and then you could do see-through up here and just grab that and pull it to the left. Oops, looks like I got yay, I updated something. Go through here and do see-through, and you can actually just use this while you're sculpting. Or we have our texture loaded, right? Here's a little trick. You can say texture, we can do Z to bring back our reference. We can just put this over here to the side, and then make sure under brush samples, spotlight projections turned off, and you can just have this hanging out. So now you can just kind of move this up. You could also paint it just like we did. We could apply that to a plane. Actually, that's one way to do it. We can also do Shift D. If we go back to our original plane here that we were working with, I want to say, actually, let's do this. Here's another way to do reference. We'll bring in a plane primitive, just like we started with. Go back down here to, make Polymesh 3D. Go down here to our texture map. And again, we're going to load this ketchup texture in here. We're going to say Polypaint, shift Polypaint from texture, get the right aspect ratio, turn texture back on. We'll switch over here to flat color just to make sure we're getting all that information. In fact, I can even go through here and just get rid of this. And now we have a plane that we can use as reference. And I can just stick this over here. And then I'm going to go out of edit mode and say always switch. That'll drop that to our canvas. And then we'll just hop back over to our ketchup, drag that back out, go back in edit mode. And now we've got our reference kind of sitting there. And now we can just kind of use that as reference. If you want it to be even more precise, we can hit Z to bring back our spotlight viewer. I'm going to turn this down a little bit. I'm going to position our ketchup packet. So here's the inflated middle part right here. We only have 55,000. That might be enough. And I want to paint this. So in order for us to paint, I got to go back to brush and under samples say turn on spotlight projection. So when I can actually sculpt through. You'll see if I hit Shift Z, that'll turn that off. I'm sculpting through. I don't want to do that. So I'm going to say Shift Z to turn that, or Shift Z to turn that back on. I'm going to say turn off Z add and just turn on RGB for my standard brush, or you could do BPA, which is your paintbrush, and then you can just literally paint that ketchup right on there. So now we have painted ketchup and it went through the back. That's fine. Now, if I want to see a little bit better, because you're going to like, okay, go to the standard brush, turn on RGB, and you're going to go be sculpting. And it's like, I can't really tell what I'm sculpting. You can go in here to render and then say fade opacity. You can fade that opacity back. And now you can kind of see your geometry a little bit better. And now we're just using this as a guide. So you can see the highlights over here, like there's a big old divot right here. You can put that in there. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to protect our outside. So Control Shift Tap our inflated part. And then again, I like the Control Tap to hit mask, and then Control Shift Tap, and then Control Tap to invert that mask. Our mask looks kind of weak. That's because it's tied into that whole render fade opacity. Another thing you can do, I'm going to Control Drag to get rid of that mask. You can go, if you're not really you don't really care about the paint job necessarily, but you do want to knock that color back, just go into your color here with white selected, drop your, turn on RGB and drop your RGB intensity down, and then just go in here and say fill object. Just hit that a couple times. That'll fill in white pixels along with your Polypaint. That's another way so you don't have to resort to fade opacity. And now when I hold down Control Shift Tap and then mask and invert, now you can see obviously what we're sculpting on. So that'll just be a way to be like, hey, I don't want to sculpt wrinkles on the outside yet. I just want to sculpt these wrinkles on the inside. And again, if there's too much resolution, you have subdivision history now, so you can go through and you can drop through your subdivisions here. So you can say, I'm going to drop down a little bit. We'll get some, I'm just using the standard brush here. If you want it, if you have a big old standard brush here and you're pulling back through to the other side, for every brush that you're using, you can go down here to auto masking and you can say turn on backface mask. That way you can just sculpt on one side and not have it do anything on the other side. So we can go through here. You can use the Inflate brush if you wanted to. You can use I don't know, slash brushes. Shout them out. Shout out all your favorite sculpting brushes for basically cloth sculpting. Is what you're doing. I'm just kind of looking at my reference here and just going through here and just kind of, again, you don't have to match this exactly. In fact, as we move forward, making other stuff, we'll do some shrink wrap peanuts, some saltines, other shapes and sizes and colors and stuff. We'll go ahead and do that. But for now, and in fact, you don't even need this. It's like, okay, I don't, just turn that off and just be like, oh, look at this. I'm getting a little ketchup packet sculpting. So let's go to the back here and be like, okay, you're just looking for visual cues, right? So you're going to go through and be like, okay, it looks like the corners are kind of pulling in. So I'm holding down Alt and just kind of sculpting in. Then I'm letting go of Alt and just kind of sculpting out a little bit. Hold down Shift to smooth. I have my Shift smooth here. If we go into smooth brush modifiers, I have it set if you hold down Shift, weighted smooth mode, set the one that smooths stronger. So I often have to go in here and turn my Z intensity down just a bit. You probably won't have to do that, but just calling that out just in case. And then you can put a big old wrinkle right down the middle here maybe, and on the side here, whatever you want to do to really make this ketchup all ketchupy. Looks like it's kind of crimping on the sides a little bit on some of this here, so we can kind of build that in. So here is our inflated ketchup packet. We're adding some wrinkles, we're going through, and we're making it more dynamic. Now, if you want to enhance these wrinkles with, like we were talking about earlier, cloth brushes, you can go to your BC, and here's a whole bunch of cloth brushes in here, cloth hook and cloth slide. You can grab those and you can go through and you can kind of, it just basically turns on cloth simulation. I'm just going to do some very subtle tweaks. So for instance, I could switch over to the pinch brush, BPI, go through here and we could use a pinch brush, but you'll see the pinch brush is just pinching geometry, which is totally useful. However, if I go in here to our elasticity, take our simulation iteration, this basically for any brush you have, you can go into elasticity underneath your brush menu, simulation iterations up to 100 in this case. I want all simulation all the time. And then as we go through here, I can use pinch to kind of go through and kind of pinch. Now, you're going to see as I'm pinching, it's actually inflating. Same thing with the other cloth brush. Remember, under dynamics, we have inflate turned on. Turn that off. So now when I pinch, it's just going to go through and kind of enhance these wrinkles. In fact, if we go through and we say subdivision level 4, that'll give us more geometry, and then our wrinkles will be even finer. In this case, I kind of want to keep it at subdivision level 3, I think, and go through here, maybe even subdivision level 2. Go through here and just kind of maybe use my pinch brush to kind of give me a little more oomph on my wrinkles here, and whatever you want to do. So we'll go through here and put this back up to 4, and we'll smooth it down a little bit, and now we've got a pretty decent ketchup packet going. Now if I control drag, you're going to see this outside area is still very flat, and that's not great. So I'm going to go ahead and say, you know what, I do want it very flat. I do want it to look like this middle section has been poofed out and filled with ketchup, and then the outside section is stamped flat and just kind of stuck together, right? So I'll go ahead and smooth that transition out a little bit, but I do want to maintain that border. Now, on the top here, you see we've got these big fat horizontal lines. Let's go ahead and add those in. If we have our standard brush, we'll turn off RGB. We got Z-Add turned on. By default, if you go in here to stroke, you'll see lazy mouse is turned on. You can tap L on your keyboard to toggle that on and off. So if I hold down Alt and then go across, you'll see this little rubber band, and then you let go of Alt, it'll just put a straight line across here. So you can hold down Shift. So before I start dragging, and you also use the space bar to move this around. So you can hold down Shift and then let go, and it'll put an outie in there, and we have backface masking turned on. If you wanted to go all the way through, again, just turn off, because this is such a thin mesh. If I go in here and say auto masking, turn off backface mask, and then I go through here and I stamp, it'll probably pull through on the other side. And then just above this, I'm going to hold down Shift before I start sculpting, and then hold down Alt. It'll actually punch back through, and that'll punch on the other side. So we can actually just alternate that. And we'll do one more punch through like this. So now we've got that kind of top part wrinkles, and then same thing for the bottom. Now, if you tap L, if I go in here to stroke and tap L, lazy mouse off, you can, as you start sculpting, you just hold down Shift, and you can just kind of, it'll constrain you to a straight line. It's a little lumpy. Let me see. Can I lazy mouse dot, try freehand maybe? That even this out a little bit? Not really. I mean, it's not terrible, maybe not great, but you can kind of constrain your stroke, and you can kind of do that. So that's fine. Use those to your advantage if you'd like. So now, this top part has those intentional. I keep saying that. Let's show you what that is. Visual communication, and I'll give you a link. So this is under my contextual design section of my design stuff. This is from Mike Hill. And if you scroll down, designing for entertainment, he talks about what we're working on, which is intentional stress risers. These are just those little notches built in on purpose so that when you go through, these will be very weak. So when you pull down, it'll rip right through, right? In fact, right where it says tear here, any of these you tear, it'll allow you to tear right through. If these were just flat, it might actually be really difficult to tear through there. So we need to add those in. And also there's wrinkles on the sides of this thing. We've kept them protected for now, but let's go ahead and unprotect them. So just down the side here, I'm going to hold down Alt and let go of Alt with my standard brush. We're just going to use a standard brush mostly for this. We can go through here and we can kind of, give it a little personality, give it a little wrinkling, just holding down Alt, letting go of Alt. And now we've got our little packet all, packeted up. So we've got that, we got it all. Oh, and then if we go into our move brush, we're like, okay, cool, I want to use our move brush here. If you go through here and try to pull up or pull down, first of all, you're going to see it's pulling down, but then it's like, it's not going all the way through the object. So again, let's turn on our floor here, and we're sitting on our floor plane. We're Z forward, X to the left and right. I think originally we were like upside down, but it's just a Ketchup packet. So if you wanted to, you could hit W and just, you know, rotate this, move it. If you want, in fact, if you want to lay it down on the table, we can hold down Shift and then just rotate it down. You'll see when I do that, the floor snaps to the bottom of this object. That doesn't mean that's your world center. Your world center, if I do go in here to draw, you can turn on elevation. It's set to -1 by default, which means the lowest subtool in your scene, the floor is going to snap to it. And the reason for that is if I go in here and hit BPR, you'll always have a shadow catcher here. If you don't like that, you can turn it off. You can go in here to, if we turn on our floor here, you can go in here to draw, not turn off your floor, that's just turning off the floor button, but going in here to elevation, setting that to 0, and now the floor will be right in the middle of the object. Now, if you try to use the floor as a shadow catcher, it's going to catch a shadow right in the middle of your object, but at least that'll show you where 0, 0, 0 world axis is if you're a little more developer-y. But if you're an illustrator, just go in here to draw, and then say elevation of -1, and that'll just move that floor plane down to wherever the lowest point is, and then again, you can use that as a way to catch shadows when you hit BPR render. Okay, what was I talking about? Okay, stress riser. So now, 2 problems. Number 1, I'm using move, and I want it sharp, right? So when I do this, I don't want that little loop here. So if I go in here to our move brush and say curve, I can turn on AccuCurve. In fact, I already have a brush saved with that turned on. That's set to AccuCurve because I use that all the time. So now when I go through here, I'll get a much sharper transition. I also wanted to go all the way through my object. And right now it's like pulling the front down further than the back. We can fix that. So if I turn on my floor, again, it's kind of laying on the table here. And that means if I want to go all the way back through the object, I want to be infinite in the Y direction, that big green thing. So indicator. So we're going to go down here to depth, and we're going to say infinite depth, and instead of the Z direction, if it was standing up, it would be the Z direction, but since it's laying on a table, we're going to say infinite depth in the Y direction. So now when I use my, this is set for any brush, you can go through here, and now when I move this down, it's going all the way through the object. So I can pull down here, and then I can pull up here, or I can just go through here and just pull up if you want to. I'll do a little combination of both. We can also turn on X symmetry just by tapping X on your keyboard, so we can just get this done a little bit faster, and we'll just go through here. And in fact, if some of these risers aren't that sharp, you know, you may have an MRE or a mustard packet or something that has a little bit of a softer transition, that might actually be perfect. If you need the sharper transition, we'll just go through there. Give me a second here, and we'll kind of pull out here. And now we'll have our intentional stress risers. And we've got our wrinkles where we want. And if you want more detail, just go in here and hit divide. In fact, if you're dividing now, I would say turn that smooth modifier back on, so when you divide, it'll just kind of give you a nice little smooth. You can turn off X symmetry here, and you can go through here and just make this even more, you know, wonderfully detailed. So now let's talk about Polypaint. So if we want to apply this texture back to our object, remember we have our reference sitting out here, so we can just scale this in here to match like so. And let's make sure turn our floor back on. Z forward, yeah, as a bottom, that should make sense. We'll go through here, and in fact, one thing I might want to do is I can sample color. So if it's Shift Z to turn that off. So if I just want to paint, I can go over here to my image and then tap C, and that'll sample that color. So if you go through here and just tap C for all of these, over these, or you can just drag from your color onto your object, and that'll go ahead and pick that color. So if I want to go through and say, you know, color fill object, make sure your RGB is at 100%. That will go ahead and fill that object 100%. In fact, if you want to make that more shiny, let's go in here. You could use something like toy plastic, I think, is a default shiny material. So now, and again, if you want to change that, you can go into the material properties, go down here to modifiers, and say that specular curve is very tight. I can move this out a little bit, and that'll kind of broaden it just a bit. So now we have a nice shiny tomato ketchup packet that's filled with red. And then we can go back to our standard brush or our paint brush or whatever. We'll turn off Z-Add, keep RGB on. We can hit C to, you know, sample the gold here. And now you can go through here and you can paint with gold, or you can mask here, invert it, and then fill that with gold color fill object. There you go. All sorts of things. Now, if you want to paint from your image, we'll just turn our image back on by hitting Z on our keyboard. It's in our spotlight that we added earlier. We can move this into place. Standard brush. Make sure under samples and our brush menu, sample spotlight projection is on. Only RGB is on, and then we can literally just paint here. Now, while I'm painting, let's go ahead and do this. Let's turn that. Yeah, that's fine. So we're painting this onto our packet here. Shift Z to turn that off. If we go to the back, oh, dang it, it's backwards. You can stop it from doing that. In fact, well, we'll just do this. Again, we'll just say sample this red. Fill that with red with color fill object. And then when I'm using my standard brush, the brush, this is so thin that it's going through the entire object. Just remember, go down to auto masking, turn on backface masking. So now as I'm painting, I can paint one side here. And then Shift Z to turn that off. We'll flip it over. Z to turn that back on. And we will paint. I don't know what the back of this packet would really look like, but I don't know. I'm just going to assume something similar. There we go. So now we have our Ketchup packet here. And now when we go to render this one with BPR, oops, we'll turn on our floor plane so that it'll catch our shadow here. And in fact, just to see it a little bit better, we can rotate this. Let me see here. That was a little stuttery. There we go. So now we've got our Ketchup packet all nicely modeled and being able to render. In fact, if you wanted to, let's go ahead and undo that. We have subdivisions on here. So if we wanted to say, you know, drop it down to subdivision level 4, let's go ahead and turn off our Polypaint real quick. I'm going to mask. Let's go back to a white color. If I mask the bottom of this here and then Control Tap to kind of blur it out, also in your masking menu, you can just use, there it is. You can just use blur in there if you want to. Remember, we have BTA, which is transpose cloth, turned on. So as I'm transposing, it'll actually go through and bend, give you little wrinkles on here. Let's go drop down one more. Subdivision level 3, I think, is the sweet spot for the wrinkle size we're looking for. So again, as I bend this, it'll start wrinkling up. And if those wrinkles aren't perfect, it's just a start, right? So you can just go through here and be like, you know what, those wrinkles are a good start, but you know, I'm going to go through here on the side and say, hold down Alt with my standard brush here, and maybe, you know, I'll probably have more. Well, I'll go ahead and unmask and whatever you want to do to make this look a little more. Get a ketchup packet or hot sauce packet, fold it up and see where the wrinkles happen. You know, use good reference. And now we've got our little folded wrinkled version that we can turn that on. There we go. So now we've got a little wrinkly version. Okay, I haven't been paying attention. Let's see here. That's changed. Small note, I saved the file as a subtool. Oh, well. So when we were talking about, if you go in here to tool save as, that should save your scale. And the generic units or whatever that ZBrush is using. That's saving a tool that has all of your subtools underneath it. If you go to File Save, that'll save a Z project, which will have your tool, your subtools, and anything else you have loaded over here. If you go to Tool Export and say export that as an OBJ, that might be doing something weird. But if you're just working in ZBrush, I would just say Tool Save As, and that should keep everything consistent. Save the subtool file at night, open in the morning. Change high poly meshes in Nanomesh. Was almost 1.5K right now. So now 1. Is low poly. That's weird. Because if you're saving a subtool file, and that's tool save as, I'm assuming, that'll save your entire tool packed with subtools. That shouldn't change. I'm not sure what that is. Oh, I can't. I wish I could read that. Yeah. Now you can sculpt the ketchup packet. So we're going to have more fun with this. So you know what? I'm going to duplicate this off because I like that little bent version. And then on this one, I'll drag this undo slider back and we can just undo back to where it was laid out flat here. So now we have two versions, a flat version and then a folded up version. Let's hit Control N. So we have this reference on our canvas, which is cool, but I don't really need it anymore. So Control N to clear our canvas, and then there we go. And in fact, we can even bake this stuff out and go and render it in an external program. We'll do that today probably. Now, let's look for more things. I want to make more things. Let me see if I can find MREs. I want something nice and flat that we can pull from really quickly and get the right scale from. That'll be, yeah, something like this. Let me save image as. I think that'll work. I've got some on here that I think will work here, but just in case. Yeah, that should work fine. Just something that we can work quickly on. So now that we've gone through the basics here, I'm going to go a little bit faster, but we'll also talk about shrink wrapping like saltines and peanuts and stuff too. So let's go ahead in here and we'll say texture, import, and let me see. Let's grab MREs, I think. Texture, select that texture, and again, I can add it the spotlight, and there's our MREs. Now we got 2 spotlights in here. I don't need the ketchup one anymore, so select it and hit that little X button, and now we just have this one. So now we've got a bunch of different sizes of MREs, and then this one's kind of like the ketchup packet. So we'll go through and do that one really quickly, and then like the crackers we'll do, and then the peanuts we'll do. I think that'll be fun. So, and like the moist towelette and the salt packet, those should be nice and easy. I don't know. And we could even do the spoon if you want to do. So now we have that. Let's go back here to our, and we can do that. We can do this stuff really fast. So plane 3D, drag it onto our canvas, go into edit mode, make poly mesh. So we can sculpt on it. But in this case, before we do that, we're going to go down here to our texture map. We're going to grab our MREs. They look a little squished. So just remember Polypaint, hold down Shift, Polypaint from texture. That'll redo the aspect ratio. We can turn our texture back on. We can use this as reference. So, you know, I'll say Shift S, we'll store that up there. I don't think I'll need it, but it's good to have you guys looking at what we're doing here. And then what else? Oh yeah, so now I want to say Polypaint from texture. MR RGB mode on, Polypaint from texture, turn our texture off. It's super low res. We need more resolution. So we're going to go turn the smooth modifier off, divide, up to 1,000,000, let's say. And now we'll say Polypaint from texture. Now our Polypaint is on this flat plane, and we can use this as our starting point. So now we don't even have to measure anything. We don't got to do nothing. We can just go through here and quickly make, for instance, first strike. Duplicate, what is that? Nutritious energy bar. Control Shift, go through here. I'm going to do slice curve. I've duplicated this off, so we'll turn off that eyeball. Go in here to polyframe, turn off line, and I can say I want, actually, this one's a little off askew, and we can fix that, but for now we'll go ahead and slice through. Oop, first we got to say delete lower. We don't need subdivisions, we just need geometry. I'm going to say U, and U. Control Shift Tab, Geometry Modified Topology, delete hidden. And then if you want to straighten this out, just hit W. I like to use these little safe action bars, and then we can just use this to kind of eyeball this so that it's basically flat. And if you want to clean this up a little bit, just hold down Control Shift, and you can go through here and be like, let's go ahead and, make this a little more regular here. Control Shift Tab, Geometry Modified Topology, delete hidden. And then again, here is where it's kind of stamped flat, and then here is where it's also kind of stamped flat. So Control Shift Tap, Control W makes it all one new polygroup, and then Control Shift drag to invert that, Control W. And now if we turn our line back on, we can say geometry, ZRemesh half, depth size down to 0, nice even quads. The higher up this is, it'll build in more irregular surface direction basically. We don't, and it's flat planes, so we don't need that anyway. Control, keep groups, smooth groups down to 0. Thank you. And then now we're getting new geometry. Now how low you want to go here is up to you. I usually go like game res low, like this, especially at this scale. That's fine. If you don't want to go that low, do whatever you want. I can tell you what to do. And then again, if we want polygroups on both sides, you can do the things we did earlier. I'm just going to go through here with a morph target, store it, drag this out a little bit here, create diff mesh. And now I want to keep working in this file. So in that morph diff that it spit out, I'm just going to say append that latest Morph Diff. This Polypaint I don't really need anymore, so we can delete it. Keep a nice clean file. So now we got both here. So one more time, go through here. We're going to inflate this. Control W to make it all one polygroup here. We're going to turn off the smooth modifier. Divide, divide, divide. Control Shift Tap, mask, invert. We can do our inflate here, because again we want dynamic, so we can say I want to inflate this and run the simulation here, and that'll inflate it out. Maybe a little too much, or like we did earlier, BTA is our cloth transpose. Hit W, go to Unmesh Mesh Center, W, Unmesh Mesh Center. Use that to kind of inflate it out a little bit, and now we can just use our. Hold on just a second. I'm gonna have a slightly larger version open for my old man eyes. There we go. But y'all can, you youngins can use that reference right up there. So now, again, we have this center part masked. We can go through here and we'll just do a quick pass here. Let me see, our standard brush, auto masking is, spotlight projection on, backface masking is on. So let's go ahead and switch over to like a matte cap gray or whatever. And then go through here. Now we're just sculpting wrinkles. If you want to go lower, you can. Just get some primary forms going. It looks like it's kind of knocked back and kind of flat here, and then kind of wrinkly here, kind of pushed in here. And again, like a lot of times, you know, things kind of maybe pull from the corner. This will kind of indicate the material it's made out of too. If it's like kind of shrink wrapped looking, it'll kind of be that way. We go through again. Use whatever brush you want. This is just basic sculpting, and I'm just kind of being flippant with my sculpting here. But again, you could also, like we did earlier, you can paint this directly on there and use that as a guide. In our case, we're just gonna whatever, and then we'll go up. Oops, up one subdivision level. Smooth this out here. And then, you know, continue to refine this as much as you want. Control Shift Drag to unmask here. So now we have access to our long straight edges. It looks like on the side here, it does have one crimped area. So with our standard brush here and our lazy mouse turned on, I'm going to go through here and just kind of punch in or punch out. Let's go ahead and turn off RGB here. Let's get ourselves something a little better to look at. There we go. So just like we did before, we can go through here and we can punch out. We can also hold down Alt and kind of punch in, or Shift and then hold down Alt. That'll kind of punch in. And we have backface masking turned on. I kind of want to do this all at the same time, so I'm going to turn that off temporarily. And then we'll just say punch in, punch out, punch in, and then same thing over here. And then on the sides here, we get a little more wrinkles here. So you can see, again, if I'm not explaining everything, you can make a little packet, and let's drop down to one subdivision level. You can make a packet in a few, like a minute, you know, it doesn't take that long. And now, I think that's it. So we got those stress risers. These ones are actually a little rounded. So again, we'll go in here to Move Acu. Infinite depth is still turned on. Actually, let me see. Okay, so that's per brush. So when I go back to Move Acu, Infinite Depth still turned on. Now if we turn on X Symmetry and we go to our floor, this is, I don't even know like what axis this is. Like this is just sitting out in the space because we chopped it out of that image, right? But I can go over and turn on LSym. We'll turn dynamic off, and now we're locally symmetrical across this object, this object here. Now we can go in here to transform, and right now it's across the X-axis. Let's switch that to Z. So now, Z is front and back in this case, which isn't terrible. Y, that's what I'm looking for. So now I can go through here and I can do, in fact, let me see, let's do X. This isn't perfectly symmetrical, but it might actually work. Let's give it a shot. I can go through here and I can do infinite depth in the, so I still have infinite depth in the Y turned on. I need to turn infinite depth in the Z because we're a Z axis now. There we go. So now I can do both sides, kind of go through here and kind of just pull this down with my Move Acu brush. Save ourselves a little bit of time, maybe. There we go. And like I said, this one's a little rounded, but if you want to go through here and be like, you know what, let's give these a little more pointy, that's totally fine. And then one more time, we'll hit Control D to subdivide. with the smooth modifier turned on, SMT divide, there we go. And now we've got our little first strike. So again, pretty quick. Well, let's talk about shrink wrapping. Talking about scale, it's the best workflow to work real life scale with other programs like Blender, Maya. Keep the position if you move into Blender, for example. Yes, good questions. So ZBrush and scale is a little bit weird. What I like to do is if I'm intro to ZBrush scheme cell, how to import properly and maintain scale. And also, I'm just going to send you this whole thing. There's some good stuff in here. Now, what I like to do is if I'm working with a specific scale in mind, the best thing I like to do, like if I'm using Marvelous Designer and I don't want to work to the Marvelous Designer avatar scale, export an avatar, which I have on my desktop because I do this often. So out of edit mode, hit Control N to clear a canvas. Go in here to import. So if you're working in Max Maya, Moto, Blender, Cinema 4D, whatever, and you have a scale that you're working to, sometimes when I'm 3D printing, I'll do a bounding box volume in like Plasticity or Fusion 360 to get the exact millimeters that I want. And then I'll just go here and say import. So tool import. So here's the Marvelous Designer avatar. That'll go ahead and load this up. And now I'm working at Marvelous scale. So if I turn on X symmetry, my brush works fine. But when I go to export, it's going to look at this. You'll see the default for the, usually this is at like 2, I believe. It's at 966.47625. This setting right here, when you imported, it's storing that for you. So when you go to export, it'll be perfectly compatible with what you're working on, and it'll be at the world 0. Remember, if we go here to draw, I believe we were talking about this earlier. That seems to be where world center is for this object, which is a little bit weird because I think it's at the feet if I had to guess. But anyway, that should be where world center is on your object when you bring it in. It shouldn't move it. So we'll say -1 on this. There we go. So that's what I do, is I tend to, if I need to work at a very specific scale. Now, if you need to change your scale, you can go in here to Z plugin Scale Master, and you can actually click this little top button here that'll walk you through how to use it. And there's a YouTube video you can watch that'll go through and explain how to kind of set up your scene scale and etc. Yeah, there we go. So back to this. Yeah, like everyone's saying here, you can use the Go Z. If you want to see, I don't use it for Blender, but it's kind of interesting. I use, so here's my, so again, back here on my YouTube channel, if you go here to home, okay, what is going on here? Give me a second. Okay, what the heck? What is going on? Turn this off. Why can't I? Oh, you know what? Sometimes when I'm in ZBrush and then I try to click out of ZBrush without going to my mouse, it does weird stuff. Okay, it's working again. Sorry about that. YouTube. Whew. So for everybody just showing up, scroll down and you can see the What's New playlist. There's an intro to ZBrush that'll give you all the basics and then all the What's New. As well as if you go in here and you type in here, you can search for scale, as well as on my ArtStation page here. There's a bunch of projects in here, live streams and whatnot. You can go and check those out. That'll exactly like what we're doing today. I don't know that this will go in my ArtStation page. Maybe, I don't know. Ketchup packets are pretty cool. But we'll see. So again, we're going to go back to our plane here, and we can reposition these however we'd like to later. But now we know the basics. And again, if you want to reposition this plane first so that you're cutting and it's already kind of laying down on the ground, you can, but we'll do that in a second. So I'm going to duplicate this off. Let's do some shrink wrapping. So we got peanuts, dry roasted peanuts over here, and some crackers over here. So again, we duplicated this off. We're going to say geometry, delete lower, just like we did before. Control Shift Slice, go in here to polyframe, turn off line so we can see a little bit better. And for y'all, I'm going to do a skin shader so you can see even better. So here's the cracker bounding box. That'll at least give us the right scale. Control Shift Tap, delete hidden. And then again, we can even, again, we have LSIM turned on. If I do it, so I have local symmetry turned on, and I can do geometry, modify topology, mirror and weld across the X. However, when I go to slice this, you're going to see the slicing isn't a mirrored operation. Easy enough to fix. We can just slice here. Here's where the cracker is kind of contained. So we can slice one side and then geometry, modify topology, mirror and weld across the X. If that doesn't work, you can go down here to deformation, hit mirror, then do a mirror and weld, and then hit mirror again. And that'll go ahead. Basically, it just flips it, copies the slice from one side to the other, and then mirrors it back. And the reason why mirrors being weird is because, again, we're just working out here in space based on that image. You know, if you wanted to, you could hit W, go to Unmatched Mesh Center, hit home. It'll spit it. It'll put it right back into world 0, whatever. That's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I might even do that on the next one. So here we have this as one polygroup on our plane. Control W to make that one polygroup. So Control Shift Tap, Control Drag, Control W. Now we have 2 polygroups. If we turn our line back on, we want to do ZRemesh or halved, tab size down to 0, keep groups, smooth groups down to 0. I'm going faster because we've already talked about this. So go back in the video and you can see me doing it slower. And we're just going to hit half a bunch of times. So now we're getting, again, we're not making a game res necessarily, but we could. We're just getting something lower basically. Also, while we're doing this, if we want it symmetrical while we're doing ZRemesh half, just turn on X. We have LSIM turned on, so it's across the local axis of this object, and we're good to go. Just to break it up a little bit, instead of doing a Morph Diff, I mean, we could do this. We could, like our ZModeler brush, BZM, extrude all polygons, and it's like, oh, I got rid of our polygroup. Well, you can just go back here, Control Shift Drag over this here, and now we have both sides. We can hit Control W to make that one polygroup. So it's not a huge deal. I like to show you options. If you want to thin this out, I'm going to go to Unmatched Mesh Center. We'll just BTR. Wait, BTC is Transpose Classic. BTR is Transpose Regular. We can go through here and we can turn off our Transpose Cloth and just kind of scale this in. And again, we want to subdivide this up. So smooth modifier off, divide, divide, divide. 76,000 is probably fine. Again, we can also hit W and Control Tap that polygroup to just unmask just the polygroup on both sides. It's the same. And then we'll switch back. BTA is Transpose Cloth, Unmatched Mesh Center, turn X symmetry off temporarily. And now when we go through here and we scale this out, that will inflate through here. Or like we did before, you can, let's turn off our floor. You can go into our dynamics with Inflate, turn on dynamics menu, and then just run the simulation. It'll kind of, now, here's the problem. We're just inflating. This isn't filled with ketchup. This is filled with crackers, and crackers have a specific shape. In fact, they're probably saltine shaped. And I want to see them. So let's make some saltine crackers. So this is going to be, I mean, this whole, now that I think about it, this YouTube thing has been very Patrick Foley adjacent. This would be very Patrick Foley. So, you know, look up Patrick 4D and you can learn how to make this extra foodie. I'm not gonna make it super foodie because again, it's just gonna be shrink wrapped. So I'll leave it up to you how specific you want to get with this. But what I'm gonna do is I have this here, and the cracker we know is gonna fit in this area. So let's go ahead and use this. I'm gonna duplicate this off. Control Shift Tap this polygroup. We're gonna say go down to subdivision level 1, delete higher, and then geometry modify topology, delete hidden. Geometry. Modify topology, delete hidden. Custom menu, way better. Now, problem is we have, it's kind of hard to tell, but let's make it easier to tell. Display properties, double. You can see we have 2 planes here. I just want one. You could go to the side and like try to grab a little piece of this one here, and then do like Control Shift A if you want to. I'm gonna do a polygroups auto groups here. That'll give me anything that's not welded visibly will get its own polygroup, and then just Control Shift Tap this one, and then say geometry modify topology, delete hidden. Yeah, you could actually use both those planes to make the saltines because we're going to double stack them anyway, but just follow along. So we want to extrude this out. So ZModeler brush, B, Z, M, hover over face, extrude all polygons or polygroup all. It's up to you. So hover over face, space bar, pull this out. If you're already mad at me and you're already lost, just remember ZBrush what's new. Intro to ZBrush here. Inside of this ZModeler. There we go. videos 32, 33, 34 will walk you through ZModeler. Okay, so we have our saltine here. I'm gonna make it a little bit fatter. Here, nope, BTR to go back to regular old transpose. Now on this one, if we go back to our saltine reference here, you can see they're kind of soft on the corners and they're kind of puffy in the middle. So we can just go through here and we can hit, if we want to see what it would look like to subdivided, instead of subdividing, we just turn on dynamic by hitting D in our keyboard or Shift D to turn that off. That's just basically turning dynamic on in our tool property. So now we're getting a nice soft saltine here. In fact, we could even say, if we turn on, you can see we have polygroups on all sides. We can say crease PG. That'll make it super sharp here. That's a little too sharp. So I'm going to say crease level of 1, smooth sdiv of 2. And now we're getting, it's kind of holding those edges a little bit. It's like basically giving you a preview of what it would look like if you subdivided once with creasing turned on and then hit uncrease all and subdivided one more time. This is the resulting look that you would get. So it's a nice soft saltine look. Hit W, control drag back. We're going to double stack these saltines. In fact, before I do that, make these a little bit fatter maybe, and then control drag back. So now we have our double stacked saltines. Now at this point, if you're liking what you're seeing and you're like, oh, I want to sculpt some saltines, actually before we make a copy, we should probably just do it on one. Let's do this. Let's make these a little bit more like our saltine here. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some divots in here. We'll do 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3, maybe inflate around here, just do some basic sculpting on both sides. Just so when we shrink wrap, you can see the result. So the problem is if I go through here and start sculpting now, it'll let me, but you're going to see it's pretty low res. That's because dynamics turned on, making it look like a high res object, but really all you're sculpting on is this one. So if we like the dynamic result and we want to sculpt on that actual geometry and not just a preview of it, just go in here to dynamic and hit apply. Now you have real geometry. And in fact, you can go up here to the smooth modifier and hit control D again, continue subdividing. Now we already have X symmetry turned on, LSIM turned on because we're just working in space. We don't know where we are in space. But I do want to go in here to transform. We'll say X, Y, and Z. So we're going to be doing the front and back of this object at the same time. And I'm just going to go through here and just kind of eyeball, like here's the middle, top, and bottom. And if you're having problem, like if I hold down Alt and Tab, it's like, why isn't it doing anything? It's because your lazy mouse is turned on. So tap L to turn that off temporarily. And now you can just do dots really quickly. So here's a dot in the middle, dot. We'll go out to the sides here. And then I guess we'll just continue. This is going to have a little more dots than, I mean, some of them seem like they do have more dots than others, but this one's going to have a bunch of dots. And then we can go down the middle here of these and then very quickly just kind of dial in dots like so. So here is just kind of, and in fact, if you wanted, here's a fun thing you can do. Like, hey, I want to make these more contrasty. Well, if you go back here in your undo history and you kind of just scroll back, go all the way back to before you did any dots at all, and then control tap that point in history and then go all the way forward. And now when you do this adjust last, you can, it's basically just repeating that stroke over and over again. So now you can go through here and you can dial in a little more strength on those dots if you wanted to. Also, let's go in here to our inflate brush and we'll go through here. And I'm going to turn that Z intensity way down. And we're just in the middle of these. We're just going to go through and just kind of inflate up just a tiny bit. So I wasn't planning on doing any food sculpting. Again, you want to see the real food sculptor, go check out Patrick 4D. But we'll do a little bit. Now these things even have, looks like they have like little serrated edges. Not intentional stress risers necessarily. I don't think that's what their purpose is, but you can see these were kind of snapped out of a mold, you know, stamped and then snapped. So if you want to dial that in, feel free. I'm going to skip it. Okay, so we got this. Now, if I hit W and control drag back, it's not going to let me because I have subdivisions. So go in here and hit delete lower. I can control, hit X, or, you know, I'm just going to turn on activate X symmetry, turn these two off, but then I can tap X to turn off activate symmetry. I can now control drag back a copy of this here and then control drag to unmask. Now that's great, but what if I wanted those subdivisions back? Well, remember, you can just go in here and hit reconstruct. It'll reconstruct back down for you. So now we have our saltines double stacked here, and now we want to shrink wrap. I'm gonna hold down shift and turn off this eyeball and then turn this one back on, go out of solo mode. So we want to shrink wrap this here to our saltines. So what I'm going to do is Control tap these points in history. We're going to go to Unmatched Mesh Center, and I am going to scale this out with our Transpose cloth BTC, or sorry, BTA. BTC is Transpose Classic. So as I scale this out, we are going to have it kind of enveloping out past our saltines, but then I'm going to go through here and we'll turn on X symmetry. You know, we'll do X, Y, and Z. We'll do all sides at once. I do want to go through here, and I don't want to necessarily move this out. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take these crackers, go to Unmatched Mesh Center, and I'm going to scale them in just a little bit. BTR. I'm going to scale these down just a tiny bit here. Now, we have something that we want to snap another piece of geometry to, or project another piece of geometry. One easy way to do that is with this outer package selected. We can go to BZP is your Z project brush. Any visible subtool like those crackers that you have visible, you can go through. Let's make these, scoot this forward just a tiny bit. You can go through and you can let's turn off X symmetry. You can go through here and you can paint. So if I go through here with our Z project brush, I can actually project our saltine inflation back down to our cracker here. So if I go into solo mode, you're going to see we're basically just projecting, and it has to be visible. So go out of solo mode, project this down, and go into solo mode so you can see what you're doing. It's projecting back to that saltine cracker. Another way to do that is you can go select these cracker subtool, control tap the latest point in history to store those vert positions. Then we can go back to the plane, do BHR as history recall, and now you can use history to go through and it'll project back to the object. So that's one way you could shrink wrap. We're going to use dynamic cloth actually. And again, I just want to get these corners out. So I'm actually just going to sculpt them out. I'm going to hold down, just go to my standard brush and sculpt these corners out because I want them to envelope the crackers here. And then I'm going to shrink wrap this unmasked section back to our saltines. So instead of inflate, I'm going to say contract. I think that's right. And in fact, if we wanted to just go back in one direction, we turn on the floor, we can just contract this back in the Z direction. We can do X, Y, and Z. It's turned on by default, so we can just run it and see. Oh, it's just contracting right now. I need to tell it, hey, these crackers that are just sitting here visible, I have my simulated mesh selected, but then I want it to collide with these crackers that are sitting here. Turn on collision volume. In fact, I'm going to crank that resolution up. I'm going to turn inflate down so it doesn't give it a safety padding. And now when I run the simulation, you're going to see it's going to go, it's basically sucking the air out of the object and then snapping it back. Now it's doing it in the X, Y, and Z direction. Again, if you just want it to go back, you can say contract in just the Z direction. And then when you run the simulation, it'll just collapse back in the Z direction, I believe. Is it doing it? Let me see. Let me see. Floor. Also, if that's a little bit much, we can turn our subdivisions down, and that might make it go a little bit faster. It looks like X, Y, and Z is really what we want to do. I don't know. That seems to be working a little bit better. There we go. So it's shrink wrapping to our saltines. We can go back up one subdivision here. Again, just continue to run that simulation. And now we've got a little shrink wrap look. Let's go back to our reference here. In fact, it looks like I'm going to go, let's keep it on subdivision level 4. I'm going to hold down, let's mask that again. I just want a really sharp mask here. There we go. So we'll shrink wrap to our cracker here. And if you put a lot of detail in here, the detail may start showing up. You'll see like, you know, your crackers and your dots will start showing through. Again, you can also do this. Let's go to Unmatched Mesh Center here. Reset. BTA is Transpose Cloth, and then you can just scale along this. Let's turn off our floor here. And then instead of shrink wrapping, you're just going to use this to kind of suck the air out. And you can see as I'm doing this, it's, in fact, we can probably turn off contract. There we go. So as I pull this back, again, it's just shrink wrapping to the underlying mesh. Now we're starting to see some dots. I can go through and smooth this manually just to kind of knock that back a little bit because this looks a little too shrink wrapped. Or you can go in here to your deformation, and then we'll just do a polish. Might be a little heavy. Polish by feature might be better, or even just a smooth. You can crank that to the right, and that'll just run a smooth. So whatever you want to use. I'll go ahead and say, you know what? We'll just kind of soften that out. Control drag to unmask everything. We'll go through here. We don't need our crackers in there anymore. We can just turn those off. So that's one way we can kind of shrink wrap crackers. And then looking at our reference here, you can kind of see, you know, basically over the shrink wrap parts, it's pretty standard. It's not really, so we can hit W, control tap that polygroup, and then control tap to invert that polygroup. And then that'll kind of protect our shrink wrapping. We'll turn our Z intensity back up, and then we'll just do a little bit of storytelling here. Make sure backface masking is off so that we can sculpt through the packaging because it's very thin. And now we can just go through here, and we can kind of like, you know, standard brush, wrinkle, put a big old wrinkle along the side here. Looks like this has some, oh, you know what? Also, I'm going to tap L to turn on my lazy radius. That'll give us a little bit of a smoother stroke as we're doing the kind of wrinkly stuff. Here, looks like it kind of shrink wraps here, kind of fans out, and then looks like it does a fun little thing here and along the side here. All right, so we've got it all shrink wrapped. We'll go through, do a little bit of a smooth, like so. And again, like these holes are a little too pronounced. It's kind of fun that it's picking it up, but again, I don't need to see the holes that pronounced. The cloth or the plastic's a little thicker than that. So we have that, and we'll do peanuts after this because I think that'll be fun. Let's see. Yes, exactly. 4X is my comfort zone. Cool, excellent. Thank you. Inotech. Because I do scale. Scale unify to scale. My subtool, my brushes, after a while end up being super large, and I have to scale unify model to fix it. Yeah. So one thing you can do. So if you're working at and that's the thing too, is if you can sometimes get in a spot where no matter. In fact, this might be. So you can see right now, if I make my brush size really big, it's allowing me a lot of leeway, right? But if I clone this off, I'm going to do a quick save so I don't lose anything. Clone this off here, and I say, you know, I end up, like if you, BTR, just regular old transpose. And let's say, you know, you started from a Z-sphere and you start sculpting on that Z-sphere, and your creatures, because your Z-sphere is like at a 2-unit ZBrush scale and it's getting bigger and bigger. Next thing you know, you're going in here to your brush and you're like, okay, I want a nice big brush. And it's like, oh my God, my brush was only tiny. I cannot use my brush. A couple things you can do. Preferences draw. You can go in here and you can crank up your max brush size to 5,000, and now it's like, okay, I can go to 5,000, but it's still tiny. You can also go in here to dynamic brush scale and say, crank that up to 2x. That's a 2x multiplier, and we've scaled this thing so much I might have to go to like a 40x multiplier here. So now at least we can start seeing our brush, right? Another thing you can do is you can go up here and double tap dynamic. And if you want to remember this per brush, just turn on this little D icon and then turn off dynamic for your standard brush. And that will basically give you back your ZBrush scale brush. And it'll just behave as normal. Now, if I switch over to the move brush, dynamics turn back on, so now it's tiny. You can just double tap that, and now your move brush is allowed to be big. So you can use, now it is going to do some really weird things. It's not going to allow you to like move very much. So to your point, to fix this, you can go into what you were saying, deformation unify. That will put it into a bounding box of a 2-unit ZBrush scale. So now I can go in here and all this stuff I've done, like just put this back to 1, put this back to 1,000. everything's back to normal. And in fact, you can turn this off. You can turn dynamic back on. The reason why you would want dynamic on is that if you're if you have it off for your standard brush, let's say, and it's like, okay, I'm making a dot, and then you back your camera out and make the dot without changing your brush size, you're going to see there's quite a big difference, right? However, with dynamic on, it's the same thing for your IMM brushes. If dynamic's on and you make a little dot in here and then you zoom out and then you make another little dot, they're the exact same size. If I can, there you go. So that's why you want dynamic on. But when you're working at monster scales, dynamic off is an option. Preferences, draw, changing your max brush size and dynamic brush scale is an option. Or what we talked about earlier when we brought in the Marvelous avatar, when you import that, it will change your export scale here from 1, I guess the default's 1, to 977 or whatever it needs, but your brushes will still behave normally because under the hood it's making your huge Marvelous avatar ZBrush scale just to make everything compatible. As far as not having to do that every time, the Scale Master, Z Plugin Scale Master might be able to set your scene scale to something more compatible and usable. That'll actually go through, and I think it'll actually change that export setting for you. So that could keep you from having to constantly go in there and unify. But I don't know. Food for thought. To have any tips and videos on sculpting cape-like garments without applying any thickness when I try to do it, the mesh deforms too much. Yeah, so I mean you could you know what, let me see, do I have one? Let me see. Cape ZRemesh and thickness. Gosh, I don't have anything really great, but essentially if you just want a nice dynamic cape shape, I'm going to have a sphere here. I'm going to turn on Sculptress Pro BSH snake hook, and if you're like, wait, what the hell is all this, just go in here and just type in Sculptress. There you go. All sorts of cool sculpture stuff. And in fact, I might even have on here ZBrush 2018. What's new? If you look on there, and then you can go, oh, cool. What else happened in 2018? Playlists. ZBrush What's New 2018. I actually like the ArtStation one better. It's a little bit easier in my eyes. Go through here, and hey, ZBrush 2018, what's new? 56 videos. And there's a bunch of sculpture stuff in there that's really fun. But we're going through here, and we're going to make a dynamic cape. So I'm just going to go out here and just pull a cape shape out. And you may be thinking, well, I don't want thickness on this cape. That's all right. You can just go through here, hold down Control, and say, I want a cape that is this shape and this dynamic. In fact, you don't even need to fill this in. If you go down here to masking, you can say mask region, analyze region, mask a little bit, fill region. Control W to make it one polygroup, Control Shift Tab, geometry modify topology, delete hidden. I'm going to do a quick deformation polish by feature open circle to smooth that out. ZRemesh half, depth size down to 0. And now we've got our cape shape. Now to your point, I'm going to go ahead and pull these corners out. So when I ZRemesh, it'll be a little more regular. There we go. So if you wanted to sculpt on this cape, you certainly can. You can hit Control D to subdivide, and then go through here. Let's turn off Sculptress Pro, and now, we're sculpting. And now if you want to see the other side, you can. You can go in here to Display Properties, turn on Double. Also, or you can go in here to Dynamic. Instead of turning on the Smooth modifier, turn that down to 0. Underneath Geometry, Dynamic, turn that on, Smooth Subdivider off. And like we did earlier, just turn on that thickness. And now we don't even need double turned on. So now it looks like you're sculpting on a thick cape, but you're really not. So that way you can kind of get a feel for it. And again, hit Control D to subdivide. Go through here, use our pinch brush with elasticity turned on like we did earlier. Brush, elasticity, simulations up to 100. So you can go through here and you can simulate cloth as you're pinching and stuff. So here is our cape that we're doing. Now the problem is, while I'm subdividing here, I'm sculpting on thickness for a cape, but it's not real. I can just hit Shift D to turn off, D to turn it on, Shift D to turn it off. Oh, I'm actually subdividing too. That's why. I can turn dynamic off, and I just have a subdivided plane here. And so you're just working on one subdivided mesh, and you're only deforming one object, and then you have a dynamic version that has thickness. If you want, you can say dynamic apply. It's going to kill your subdivisions, but it is going to give you that one level of thickness. If you want to get your subdivisions back, one thing you can do is BZM, ZModeler brush. And actually, there's an algorithm or a number you can do. What is it? It is there you go. Dynamic thickness post sub D in segments. You can use that method. I'll go ahead and, if you want to watch those, you can check that out. I'm going to do it this method, where essentially I can go through here with my ZModeler brush, insert single edge loop, and if I put one down the middle and hit reconstruct, it'll reconstruct once. If I undo that and put one on either side and hit reconstruct twice, it'll reconstruct twice. So just keep doing that. Just putting one down the middle, one down each side, and then putting one down each side of here, and that will allow you to reconstruct all the way back to subdivision level 1. So now you have thickness, you have, you sculpted on one side of the cloth, and then you added thickness back, because I assume you want thickness on your cloth. If you don't, then just leave it thin and turn on double or whatever. So that's the way you can get your subdivision levels back and sculpt on single-sided. You can do a morph diff too, if you wanted to say, delete lower, control shift tab to isolate this, delete hidden, hit W, and then just say morph target, store morph target. In fact, you can even do a deformation, just do a deflate, just deflate it a little bit, say create morph diff. There's your morph diff. It inverted the normals, no big deal. Just go down to display properties, flip, and now again, we're in the exact same bucket that we were in before. You could even do an extraction underneath subtool. Geez, we're getting all of them today, everybody. Subtool, extract, turn off smoothness, crank up thickness, apply it. You'll be in the exact same position. Then you can just go in here and say, insert, one down the middle, that's one reconstruct. One down each side of that, that's another reconstruct. One down each side of these, that's another reconstruct. And then now we can go through here and say, geometry, boop, boop, boop. There we go. So now we have our cloth, plane, subdivision, etc. If that makes sense. Cool. All right. So delete. No, not that. Delete. And then delete. And then saltines. So here is our, let's go ahead and start naming these. Saltines. These are actual saltines. I don't think we need those anymore. This is I don't know what that is. That was our energy packet. So let's do one more, and we're gonna shrink wrap some peanuts. You know what? It's just a square. I don't need to do anything major on this. So let's do this. Let's make a peanut. What does a peanut look like? When in doubt, Google it. Images. So if you're eating roasted peanuts, it's probably going to look something like this. It's basically, you got some full ones in there, and then you also got some half ones where it's basically just like a half elongated sphere with a little divot cut out. We can make those pretty easy, right? So Control N to clear our canvas. What's the basic shape? A sphere-ish. Edit. Make Polymesh 3D so we can sculpt on it, elongate it out. That's basically our peanut. If you wanted to, you could be like, you know what, go in here and say maybe like a bend curve, add a little resolution. You can say, you know what, this peanut's going to like bend in the middle a little bit, get a little personality. Maybe on one end it's inflated. Peanuts aren't perfect spheres or whatever. So here's kind of a gross peanut. That's fine. I'm going to duplicate this off. Now I want to do a half a peanut. So I'm going to look right down the side here. Control Shift. We're going to switch to, you could do trim. I'm just going to say clip. I'm just going to move this geometry back. So we're going to take like half of this peanut here and we'll just kind of clip it back in half. And then maybe we'll smooth this out here. And then it looks like those divots kind of go a little heavier in the middle. So we'll kind of, I don't know, make a peanut. How hard is a peanut to make? We made a peanut. Now we got two peanuts in here. Now you could be fancy and you could like distribute these on you could even simulate these on a plane. So I'll show you. I'm not going to do it, but if you were so inclined, it would be something like, well, first you could do like, you could use Nanomesh to go through and like populate peanuts on a plane, or you could even use it to Micropoly things to a plane and have it simulate into a pile if you wanted to. I don't know. There's that, and or yeah, Micropoly. Yeah, like this one, Micropoly fit, weld, and scale, and fake rigid body simulation. You could like make a bunch of planes with peanuts, or what is it? It's these squares could each be assigned a peanut, and then you could simulate the squares down, and then they would all your peanuts would fall, even though they're planes, and then you can convert that. So basically this, where you go, boo, you could do this. So I'll copy this to you. We're not going to do that. That's a bit much. So we got peanuts here. Let's go ahead and just distribute these peanuts. So hit W. I'm going to hold down Control and drag out a copy, and we'll rotate it around a little bit so it's a little different, and then we'll rotate a copy and maybe go this way, and maybe, you know, this one will kind of lean up a little bit here. And then for this one, we'll hit W, and we'll move all these over. And then we got a little half shell peanut. So this one will turn to the side, Control drag. We'll turn this one to the back. Here, Control drag. Again, even on this one here, we'll kind of tilt this one up. You know, and then I'm going to take all of these. I'm going to merge these down. So my hotkey for merge down is, I don't remember, Control E. You can go to here, just hit merge down. So now this is all one subtool. We'll Control drag out a copy of this, and we'll say rotate this around. We don't want it to be crazy. We want them all to be peanut-ish here. And then Control drag out another copy here, and we'll rotate this around. This could be coffee beans. This could be peanuts. Let your imagination go wild for your shrink wrapping delights. Now, if we want to clear out some of these, we can go in here. We can say Polygroups, Auto Groups underneath your Polygroups menu. We can say, okay, we don't want this one here, this one. You know, we can kind of clean out a little bit of this. Say Geometry Modify Topology, delete hidden here. So we got a little nice little pile of peanuts. So we want to put a shrink wrap around this. Let's go ahead and just, you could cut it out like we, you know, go back to the video, do whatever you want. But we can say, I'm just going to append a plane here. So we're working right down the middle axis here. And in fact, let's go in here to solo mode so I can kind of see where that is. There it is. So if I turn these on, just like we were talking about scale earlier, I'm going to scale these peanuts down so that they kind of fit our ZBrush plane. I don't want to get too big in ZBrush. We're just kind of playing around. So we have our peanuts here, and then we have our plane. Now, again, we want a little bit of wiggle room because the shrink wrapping happens here in the middle, and then this is all flat, right? So let's go ahead and say here is our middle section here, and then we want a little wiggle room. Yeah, I think that'll work. So we could, instead of like going through and ZRemeshing half and slicing anything, we have a plane. It's nice and even. We're just keeping it square. So I'm going to turn on X symmetry. In fact, we could do transform. So X, to turn on X symmetry, we can do X and Y symmetry. Yes. Control Shift drag, and we could say, okay, this little middle section here is where our peanuts are going to reside. So Control W to make it on one polygroup here. See here. I'm trying to make it centered-ish. We want 3, 3, and 3. Control W. And we can actually say Control W. There we go. Is this, I guess when I, okay, I'm just going to hit Unify to recenter it and then scale it up from the middle. I must have gotten off axis. Sorry about that. Here's something that comes up sometimes. If you're ever like slightly tweaked off axis and your X symmetry isn't working on your character, go down here to position and make sure that X position is zeroed out in your geometry position. Okay, so, okay, we're good. This is, I want this gone. I didn't really think this would be the hardest part of the damn live stream is making a selection. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Ugh. Okay, here is our middle section here. here is our peanuts. Whew, jeez. Go ahead and stick these right in here. So just like we did earlier, what's the easiest way to do it? You know what? We'll just do this. ZModeler brush, extrude, all polygons. We'll pull this out. I'm going to go to the back here and we'll say U, Control W. So this is all here. And then we're going to say we're going to get some more geometry. So smooth modifier off, divide, divide, divide. And then we'll go turn on polyframe. Here we hit W, Control Tap. This polygroup, I'm going to go to Unmatched Mesh Center. BTA is our transpose cloth. We're going to kind of inflate this out and then set that. Inflate. Oh, we need to turn off. Our collision volume's still on and it's colliding with like a saltine crackers, right? So we don't want that. So turn your collision volume off first. We'll go ahead and inflate this out so it's got a little bit of air in it, like so. And then I'm going to turn on transparency so I can center these peanuts. There we go. And then back here, I can say, wow, thanks for the update. Today's Tuesday, everybody. I can say BTA, transpose cloth, and we're just going to shrink this back down. Of course, I need to turn on collision volume so it collides with my peanuts. And then I'm going to turn down subdivision level 3. And we'll kind of shrink wrap this back. Now, it seems like it's doing a little bit of extra work, but I don't have anything on. I mean, I don't know. I can make that work. Let's try this. Let's go down to subdivision level 2. I'm going to do a quick shrink wrap here, and then I'm going to go through and kind of smooth. So we're still masked. We're still shrink wrapping. It's giving me a little extra. So I'm just going to go through here and kind of inflate just around the peanuts just a little bit here. And then again, BTA, transpose cloth, and then maybe subdivision level 3. And then as I shrink this back, there we go. We're getting a nice shrink wrap look. And then if this is a little much, you can go through here and we'll unmask this. So this is our crimped part here that gets like crimped in the machine. And then here's our little shrink wrap coffee beans or peanuts or whatever. And then we'll just continue that wrinkle storytelling out. We'll just say, hey, I like the direction that these are going in. And this will kind of just give you that shrink wrapped, kind of that continuing that shrink wrap look. So, and again, we have backface masking off. So it'll go through our thin object, which is what we want. And you know, let's do, I think subdivision level 3 is fine. So here, right across here, and right across here. Now, while we're doing this, remember, you can go back with any brush you want. I'm using my pinch brush a lot with our elasticity cranked up to 100. So when I go through here and say subdivision level 2, we can use this to kind of go through and punch up some of these wrinkles that we're making. We also don't need to see our peanuts. We can turn those off. So now we have our shrink wrap peanuts. We'll go ahead and get rid of this stamp line here. It's a little too pronounced. And there you go. So now we're collecting. So let's go back to our main stack here. We'll say append our peanuts, and then we'll say append our ketchup packet, and then we'll go back to that ketchup packet, and we'll say append our other ketchup packet. Okay, we don't need this plane anymore, so I'm going to delete that out of here. We got saltines, energy, peanuts. Bent packet, and all right. So we could bake these out and texture them if we want to. But first I need to go in here. I'm going to turn on my floor and I make these a little bit, I'm going to lay them out so we can see them a little bit better. So, and you know, make them compatible scales. If you were cutting them out of that image like we were doing earlier, they'll all be the exact right scale. You wouldn't have to worry about it. In our case, we'll probably have to eyeball it, but we can go through here and we can say, let's rotate this here. Why is everything acting so heavy? Oh, is it because I have Transpose cloth still on? BTR. There we go, much better. Okay, so we got a little pack of peanuts over here. We got a ketchup packet and a bent ketchup packet. We have saltines here. And then we have kind of a miscellaneous packet here, kind of an all-purpose. Rotate and rotate. And we'll make this about the same size as a ketchup packet, I guess. Okay, so let's go ahead, and we got the floor here. We got Y up. I'm going to go ahead and just lay these down like they're on a table here. And some of these are polypainted, some of them aren't. But if we're going to go through and texture them, that's not a huge deal. Let's go ahead and move this one down. Okay. And we can texture these up, maybe, if y'all want to. We got time. Cool. Motion cube. John says, shift tap on the up arrow button. Subtool menu does not send my subtool to the top. It pops the subtool down one level. I think that was a 2025 thing. So, for instance, let's say I want to work on just my ketchup packets, and I have no idea where they are in my subtools. I got tons of subtools over here. I don't want to have to deal with them. So all you need to do is you can alt tap over here. And if you want to see what you're alt tapping, if you have Polypaint on, you can hold down shift, turn off the paintbrush, and that'll turn off Polypaint. So now we can go through here and say, okay, I want to work on this one. You should be able to, if this is just kind of sitting in your subtool stack here, shift, bent down arrow will shoot to the bottom, alt tap this one, shift, bent down arrow, shoot to the bottom, and then shift, turn off the eyeballs and turn those back on. Now, I think if you update to 2025.0.1, that gets, so I think they were having a problem with like this one, the shift bent down arrow wasn't working, but now it seems to be. So that's probably what that is. Yeah, whenever anything weird happens, just look at the release notes and they probably fixed it. Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you for still loving me. Hey there, speaking of the food guy, like I mentioned earlier in the stream, if you want to know the real food sculpting outside of our weirdo saltines and peanuts that we made, go check out Patrick 4D's. We shrink wrapped the food today, Patrick, but and made some packets, some condiment packets here to accessorize our food. But yeah, go check him out. He's got some good food stuff. I don't know that these are real great to eat, but you know, you could do some MRE peanut butter food renders. Hey, thank you, Alan. Thank you. That's nice to hear. I hope this has all been, I don't know how fun it is to make this stuff, but I don't know. There's a couple really fun, cool techniques, I think. So let's talk about, because Ian said I was allowed, I'm going to go in here and we're going to texture these in Substance Painter. So let's make a game res and a high res. So we've already got our high reses, right? This is all a nice sculpted high res detail. So I'm just going to go through here and we'll say _high, energy _ high. So basically, if I want to name my high to my low, these are already exploded. I don't really need to do this, but I'm just walking through in case you need it. In fact, if you want more resources on this game res stuff, I think I got some stuff, don't I? Let me see, playlists. If you want like quick and dirty, like how I did, let's do this. Way back in the day, ZBrush 28. I was at the ZBrush Summit 2018. I'm not signed in. And I did a presentation on like how to do really quick and dirty ZBrush stuff while you're working. So you can go and check this out if you want to. And then also in here is like a 96 video series on everything I talked about in the video. But the whole point of this is like, hey, I can go through really quickly and make like a half a day or a couple of days, make a weapon and then decimate it down, auto UV it, run it through Painter, and then throw it into Engine, and then we can evaluate a concept basically without a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and evaluate and make good decisions based on that. So here's kind of, again, quick weapon, and then throw it in there. Animation VFX does their thing, and the weapon is basically throwaway. It's just concept work, not throwaway, but it's in context. You can run around in game and make good decisions based on that. Cut to the sci-fi weapon pistol series. That'll walk you through like quick and it's not very quick and dirty. This one, the speed modeling and texturing is super quick and dirty. Like here's how you can make a rifle and then just throw it through Painter really quickly. Check that one out. Sci-fi pistol's a little more involved. It gets a little more into booleans and stuff, but the end result is much the same. And then I want to say also, oh, here we go. The Mechanical Skull high-res substance painter rendering. The Mechanical Skull series might have some game res texture stuff in it. Anyway, we have our high-reses here. Rename _ high. I'm going to export all of these as one file. So I'm going to say tool exports onto our desktop as FBX. So that's going to pack all of these subtools into one file here, and they're all going to be named the name _ high. We'll call this packets high. And then we're going to say, hold on just a second. You can't see the screen and I can't move it up for you. But here, visible, binary, smooth normals is all you need on. Say OK. And that's going to export 882,000 points, so give it a second. And that's going to be our high res. And then we're going to make our game res. That's going to need a low res. Substance Painter will auto UV for you, but we'll use ZBrush to UV our stuff. The other thing, too, that you might need to worry about is if you wanted this all on one texture set, assigning all one material to these, I'm not sure you can do in ZBrush. I would export the low reses into Max Maya, Moto Blender, Cinema 4D, or whatever, assign a material to those, and then export that low. I'm going to make these all different texture sets because it's not a huge deal and we can work around it. But just want to shout that out. So now we need our low res. So through here, I'm going to say rename high. We'll say low. And we can just copy that. So copy, rename. There's probably a utility for this, but we don't have that much. So now we have our low. However, our lows are the exact same poly count as our highs. We don't want to put 882,000 polygons into Engine. Well, you can now make them nanite, static meshes. But we can also go through here and we can say, I'm going to hold down. We don't need Polypaint exported with our lows, so we can hold down Shift and turn that off. I can go through here and I can drop it all the way down to subdivision level 1. Careful though, we are going to miss some of those little pointy ends, right? So if you want to maintain those, I would say maybe you could start with subdivision level 3, say delete higher, and then you could actually go through here and clean some of this up. So if we do look at this, we could say, you know what, we don't need this one. So insert single edge loop, just hold down Alt, say delete lower. You can go through here and you can say, I don't need all these extra edge loops here. And I don't know, you could probably go through every other one of these. You could even, here's a weird fun thing maybe, go through here to edge loop. And there is a, you can say delete loops based on angle threshold. So if you crank this up or down, it'll go through and delete loops based on what's not really being modified. In this case, it's all kind of wiggly, so you're not going to lose any much, but at least it'll go from, what's our other one here? Let's see, Ketchup. It'll go from subdivision level 4. Oh, shoot, I wasn't all the way up. That's fine. Make sure you do subtool all high. That'll ensure that you're at the highest subdivision level. That's not a huge deal though. So instead of exporting 222,000, we could export out, basically our subdivision level 3, which is 13,000, which is what this Ketchup low is. 13,000. So again, that's still pretty high. You could go through here and manually, cut these in and make sure it's all nice. But anyway, I'm just gonna do this 543, delete higher. And then for some of these, like the peanuts, there's nothing really going on here. So we could probably drop this down. We don't have the the riser. We can drop this all the way down to subdivision level 1. Delete higher, that's totally fine. Energy packet, same kind of deal. We'll drop it down to like 3. And then saltines. This one will be, yeah, we can drop this all the way down to 1. So here is our low reses here. So, and again, if you want to double check, what I like to do is go in through here and say merge visible, and that'll stick out a merged subtool, and then we can just back out and go, okay, altogether this is 44,000 polygons. Yeah, these are a little heavy, but you know, we wanted to build those risers in, so it is what it is. But at least we know these are our game reses. There's not one in here that's like 5 million accidentally, right? So we're good. So we'll go back here. All of our lows are visible. We'll turn off solo, and we're going to go in here and we're going to say exports, and the names match. So we're going to say packets low. Actually, I exported packets low and in the exact same settings. However, I forgot we need to make UVs. So let's do that real quick. Waiting for options to finish. Okay. Something weird. Yes, this is live. Oh, thank you, Ali G. Did I not close that? Oh, is it doing that thing again? What is going on here? Let's see. Come on. Tool. It's acting like my options window is still open, but I hit OK. That's weird. Shoot. Waiting for options to finish. Okay, hold on just a second. It was waiting on some menu or something, but I think I got a quick save. Give it a second. Basically, well, hell, let's see. Let's see if it did export. File, well, if you wanted to have it auto UV for you, you can go in here. Hold on just a second. Camtasia. Just got to reset my screen size here. Sometimes it remembers. Sometimes it doesn't. Let's see. Huh. All right, let's try that again. Sorry about that. So one more time. And if these were all one texture sets and they were kind of overlapped on each other, you would definitely want to go through here and do namespaces. But for now, we can say, let's see, shift off geometry 3. One. Nope. And 1. Okay, merge visible. We'll just double check. Yep, that's fine. I'm gonna do a quick save here. Everything's low. Now let's talk about UVs. So if you did want to go through and have Painter do it for you, you can say File, New, and then when you bring it in, you could say Auto Unwrap if you wanted to. We can do it in ZBrush though. It's pretty easy. So first things we want to do is make sure I have polygroups where I want my islands to be. And in this case, I have extra polygroups. So what I'm going to do is Control-Shift-Tap between these two polygroups, Control-W to make it all one polygroup. Do the exact same on this side. You'll see when I'm doing that, it's kind of hard to see, but Control-Shift-Tapping between these two, the yellow and the purple, will isolate both of those, hit Control-W, so now we have a polygroup on the back and a polygroup on the front that are different. I'll make them more obvious. All right, I guess they're the same. So I'm going to isolate these, do polygroups, auto groups. So now they're different. And I'm going to do Control-Shift-Tap between these two. So basically, this side, I want a polygroup, and then this side with the extra lip, I also want a polygroup. That's going to make this an island and this an island. So really quickly, I'm going to go through and do the exact same thing. So just grabbing these ones here, and then grabbing these ones here, and then grabbing... Why is it doing that? Control-W. There we go. Let me see if I can do a little bit faster way. So another thing you can do, I think, is, so we have all these polygroups here. If I go in here and say polygroup group by normals, it'll pick up too many groups. We'll just do it this way. Control-W. It's because these are the same. That's right. That's my mistake. So these here, Control-W, and then again, Control-Shift-Tap, Control-W. So now we have this polygroup here, and then a back polygroup with that little lip. For our game res. And this will make more sense once we UV it. So saltines is done. I say saltines done. Energy pack done. Peanuts done. Ketchup not done. And bent ketchup. Auto groups here, you and you, and then you and you, and then I want to put that lip with this one. So now we got, okay, so all of these have basically, at the end of the day, a polygroup on one side and a polygroup on the other, basically. So when I go in here, I can use Z plugin. In fact, for all of these, if I have subdivision history, it's going to want to make it's going to want me to make a clone. If I just say delete lower on all of these and just make it so that there's no subdivision history, which is fine, it's a low res, I can just work. I don't have to make a clone, so I just go in here to Z plugin, UV master. Symmetry is fine, polygroups definitely. Unwrap, and then when I hit flatten, there's my UVs. So we can say unflatten. We'll go to the next one here. We'll say unwrap, flatten. If you want to move these around, just hit W, Control Tap that polygroup. And then you can go through here and you can straighten these things out. There we go. Next, oops, we want to unflatten. Next, peanuts. Here we'll say unwrap, flatten, perfect. Anybody catch the penguin? I want to start talking like Colin Farrell and the penguin. Let's see, we want to flatten. Oops, we want to unwrap and then flatten. Okay, and then last but not least, unwrap and flatten. W, Control Tap. We'll go ahead and straighten that out a little bit. So now all of our objects have UVs and they are all low. And I'm going to say quick save. And I'm going to go in here and say export as an FBX packets underscore low. Say okay. It might have just been, you know what, that window might have just been open behind a internet window, I'm not sure. So now we have our high and our low. So now we go in here and say file. Oh yeah, that's fine. File, new. I'm going to show you something real quick. Select our low res here, and we're not going to do auto unwrap. We're not using UV tiles or anything like that, so we'll say okay. And again, because we're coming out of ZBrush, it's going to give all of our low res their own texture set. Not a huge deal. We can just turn them on and off as needed. So here is our low res. Now we want to get our wrinkles and our sculpted detail on these ones already look pretty high res, but our wrinkle detail, we'll go in here to texture set settings, go down here to bake mesh maps, and we're going to grab our high res file here. Packets high, just click that little icon here. Look for any red. If you see any red, just go into your max frontal distance and just crank that. If you start seeing red, just crank that up until you don't see red anymore. Couple things. If you do want to bake the namespace, which in this case we do, not a huge deal because it already kind of exploded, but We'll go in here and say match by mesh name. Same thing for your ambient occlusion. You can say self-occlude, only say mesh name if you want. And then one more thing, our ID map, we're going to switch from material color over here to vertex color. Polypaint is vertex color, so that'll allow us to, where we polypainted the Heinz ketchup or whatever, we can project that polypaint detail to our object. So if we want that, that's fine, and we can say bake. That's going to bake our highs to our lows, I hope. I forgot to drink my coffee. And once this is all done, we can say return to painting mode. And now all of our high-res detail has been transferred to our packets. Now, if we want to see our polypaint that we had, I'm going to hold down Control-Alt, right-click, and that'll grab Ketchup Low. And then in here, we can say add a fill layer. And I'm going to go over here to search and say project. And we'll switch this to textures. You'll see here's all our project textures. And then here's our color map. So I don't know which one is baked for which. I guess we can find out. So here we have a base color. I'm going to drop this right into our base color here. Look at that. And then Control-Alt tap the bent one. And I'm going to put a fill layer in here. And then for that base color, we're going to drag that color map in there. So now we have our Polypaint applied here. And the cool thing about this, if I Control-Alt tap this one, is we have material properties now. So we have, I mean, we have it painted in there. This is kind of a little misleading because we have light painted on here, so it's not going to be super accurate, but you can go in here with this fill layer and just turn it on and off. That's your Polypaint. If you want to just recreate this, you can go in here and say create a fill layer. And then for the base color, we can say sample maybe that red. And then you know what? We'll punch up that red a little bit, make it a little more saturated, a little brighter, something like this. And then we can also go in here and we can say, hey, do we want it metal? Nah. Do we want it super matte? No, we want it super glossy. So you can go through here and make it shinier, etc. And then on top of here, you can go through here and just start painting. So for instance, if we wanted to put an emblem on here, we could make another fill layer. And on this fill layer, I can right click and we can say add a black mask and then add a paint here. And then let's go look for like alphas and just look for a cool triangle. We can hold down Control and then the left mouse button, and we can kind of scooch this around. So we can make, you know, let's do this. We'll do like a sci-fi packet. So I'm going to stamp here for one side, and then I'm going to rotate this around. And we're going to stamp here for the other side here. Actually, let's make that all. Sorry, my flow went down. Something like this. Now, this is on its own fill layer here, so we can make them disappear. We can go into these properties and say, oh, I don't want white. I wanted, I don't know, gold or red or whatever you want. In fact, you could even emboss it if you wanted to. So that's kind of the flexibility of a texture map. Actually, that's a little bit too white. Yeesh. There is a height in here, so you can punch this in. You can pop this out. You can drag in. You can do normal stamping, all the cool stuff you can do. It's pretty non-destructive. So that's a cool thing. Or if you don't want to mess with height at all, you can just turn that channel off. And then text, let me see. It's been a while since I've been in here. Font under textures, maybe. Let me see. Let's just go font. Oh, I got a lot more options now. This one's fine. So let's see here. I want to do some text. I'm going to do another fill layer just to give me more flexibility. We're going to say add a black mask with a paint. And on this one, we'll go ahead and make a base color. We'll start dark. And then on this paint layer, I can go through here and I can say, you know what? Give me brushes and just start me off with a basic hard brush. So if you wanted to do some decorating or anything like that, you can, in fact, if you want to work on it flat, you can say 2D only, and then you can go through here and you can say in your brush settings, right click and scroll down and say alignment to UV. And then now you can go through here and you can say, just tap shift and oops, let's use our mouse here. You can go through here and you can, I don't know, make little patterns, whatever you want to do. You're making your sci-fi packet, do whatever you want. And you can work on it flat like that, or you can stick with, you can do 2D and 3D if you want, whatever you want to do. Now for the text itself, let's go ahead and say Control D to duplicate this. We'll call this text. And I think, get rid of this paint here. I want to say, it's been a while. Let me make my brush size big. And then if I go over here to font, and then on my, don't want grayscale, I can drag in kind of weird that I can't see it. I mean, that works. Let me see. So I've got this here. Let's say Ketchup. Yeah, there we go. So go through here, texture your own stuff, knock yourself out. It's totally fun. Exact same thing with this. It would be a Control-Alt right click and, you know, do a fill layer. These ones look pretty plain. I wanted to say it was like a tan or whatever. And you could throw on, if you want to make it grungy or something, you throw on dirt. You can go through here and stamp text. You can go and make outlines and stuff like that. So we have that. And then if you want to render it, you can just throw it in here in iRay. And that'll, let's switch some settings here. Let's go from panorama to maybe Bonifacio Street. So here we're letting the light kind of light our scene here. So we got our Ketchup packets here at the beach, and we want them on the floor. So let's go down here to the Y and just move this up, and we might have to finagle this a little bit. Let's say -0.5 is too much. Oh my goodness. Why is this cranked over to the corner? 3.9. There we go. Something like this. So now we have our objects sitting on the ground. It looks like the peanuts are kind of lifting it off the ground a little bit there. But you get the idea. You can go through here and you can texture and light and, you know, do all your storytelling like so. And we'll go back to drawing here. So that's kind of the game res, high res. Go in here and file save. Was there anything else in here we wanted to talk about? It seemed like there was something else I was going to bring up. I guess it was the Polypaint stuff, where if we did have our Polypaint on, basically our vertex color is being transferred to our texture because we baked our Polypaint. Oh, that's it. Okay, so let me do some last minute questions here, and then we'll head out since we're at 8 o'clock. Yeah, oh, French fries with this ketchup packets? Yes, that would be a good... Do that. Render that out. That'd be awesome. How can you insert an alpha along a curve? IMM works but without adding new meshes. Say you want alpha stitches for those packages around the borders. Got it. Yeah, sure. So, a couple different ways you can do that. So, in fact, if we just do stitch, I think. I was hoping here, I'll show you a couple different ways. So, let's go ahead and edit mode, switch, Control N, and we'll go to a sphere here, edit, make Polymesh 3D. Now, Control D to subdivide a couple times. And if you had a stitch in mind that you wanted to repeat, let's say we want to go through here and say, okay, I'm going to make a Frankenstein stitch here. So we're going to go through here. Let's do subdivide one more time. I'm making a Frankenstein stitch, and then I'm going back over this with like my clay brush. And we're going to do some stitches this way, like so. And and these are actually pretty poor. Let's hold down. Let's go to our standard brush, turn off lazy mouse by tapping L. I'm going to go to either side of these. We're really going to make this look like they're kind of embedded in here. So you can make your own brush like so. Let's go into our clay buildup. I think that'll work a little better. Maybe. There we go. So we're kind of making like little stitches that we want to use as a brush alpha, like so. And if I want to capture this, I'm going to go all the way back to where no stitches were started just yet. So about here, control tap that point in history, go all the way forward, do BX, that's the extractor brush. We'll just do extractor, and then make your brush size big enough to where it's going to encompass all of this, and then hit G on your keyboard. I want to say it's under God, I don't remember where this is. When in doubt, there's this guy named Michael Pavlovich. He knows a lot of this stuff. XTractor. There's the brush basics. Oh, there's me doing stitches with color. So it'll actually do, that's a good point. I should show you that. Let's say you want to also capture color. So we're going to say we will make this skin color and then maybe a darker red with RGB turned on for your standard brush here. And RGB intensity, a lot darker. So we'll go through here and we'll say, hey, this is going to be a little inflamed. This stitch is a little inflamed here. And then the stitches themselves will be, I don't know, I guess kind of mummy stitches. C to sample. Let's make these match the other ones. Sorry. Okay, anyway, BX extractor brush. I'm trying to remember where in here, I guess B create. I'm trying to show you where it is. The hotkey is G, so if you make this big enough, hit G on your keyboard and then just drag over your stitches here, and that will capture your height alpha and your color. So now you have basically, you're dragging an alpha along with your texture, and that's creating a stitch brush. And of course you can, change your Z intensity or whatever, get whatever you want. So now, as far as how do you drag an alpha, and this could be any alpha, as opposed to the IMM brush, which is actually pretty cool. So if we go do this, just so y'all know, if we say delete lower, and I go in here to BI brush insert IMM primitives, hit M, grab a polysphere. You can drag that out as an IMM brush. If you want to embed it a little more, you can say depth and pull that depth down. And now when you drag it out, it'll kind of be embedded. And if you change that drag stroke to say dots, you can just drag out this that IMM over your mesh. So that can be very handy. But if you want to do an alpha, basically, you start with a standard brush, let's say, dot stroke, and we have an arrow here. So if we drag out this with a dot stroke, RGB turned off, Z turned on. So it's going to drag out that arrow along with our standard brush. If we change that stroke to a drag rect, we can do that. It's fading out at the edges, so just take your focal shift to -100. But what if we wanted to have a curve that had this alpha on it? So you could go in here to stroke, turn on curve mode. So now when you use your standard brush, it'll drag out a line, and then ideally it's going to kind of drag this alpha out along with it. You see it's repeating that stroke. There are brushes made for this. I want to say like the Deco brush is one, Deco curve dots, Deco curve drag reg. Let's try the Deco curve dots. So this one, we drag out a curve and then just pull on the curve. It'll repeat your alpha over and over again, and kind of build up. I want to say brush curve. I don't remember what brush it is. There's literally a brush set up exactly, I think, how you want. BC brush curve, no. Curve alpha. Not curve alpha brushes, that's IMM-ish. Paint with alpha functionality. Deco curve drag dot brush. Is that the one I'm thinking of? Oops. That was one of these. Brush. Maybe Deco curve drag dot. So you drag a curve out. Oh, there it is. Okay, so, okay, now I remember. BD, there is a Deco curve dots stroke, which is basically going to, along a curve, it's going to repeat this alpha. You can see it's a whole bunch of them, right? However, if you switch to the BD Deco curve drag dot, that's basically just changing that stroke. Okay, now I remember. So this alpha is going to be stretched along that curve, and you can just kind of pull it around. In fact, it's pretty awesome. You can go in here and say Z add, change it to Z sub. That'll flip it around and change your Z intensity down. So while you're moving your alpha around, and you can also go into your stroke and say, lock, bend start, bend end. You can turn those both on, so you can bend the end here as well as bend the start, etc. So you can drag that alpha through your mesh, just a single alpha along that curve. So that it's either the Deco drag dot or the other one, Deco curve dot. That's going to repeat your stroke, and then you can see when I update this curve, it's just repeating it. And I want to say underneath your stroke menu, curve step, if you crank that up, that will kind of space them out a little bit. Huh. Kind of seems to be doing like both. I don't know. Play around those, but I think the 1 alpha is the Deco curve drag dot brush. Making alpha stitches. Let's package around the borders. Got it. Oh, okay, gotcha. Oh, I should have talked about that here too. So as far as stitches go, this is far less destructive here. So if I want to do, say, stitches on our Ketchup packet here, if we go in here and we say stitch, I think it's a brush here, leather stitch. I'm going to do, you know what, we'll just do, I think it'll work, you know what, we can do a fill layer, I think, add a black mask, add a, again, this is stuff I don't do very often anymore, but so I can kind of click around my object. So if I want to say I want a stitch that goes from here to here to here to here to here, it'll put stitches along here. And then on my fill layer here, it's like, well, what color do I want my stitches? I want them to be bright orange, and I want them to have some height, so I can kind of punch some height through it. And it's basically creating an alpha left behind with my stitch pattern on it. Now, the cool thing about this is it's non-destructive, so I can go through here and I can, grab these ends and move them around. I can even go in here, scooch this over. The category is like set the classic. Let's go to decorative, and let's go from blanket stitch over here to like ladder stitch, and it's updating on the fly. And in fact, let's go over here to our size so you can see a little bit better. And flow, spacing. This isn't the best example. I have a goblin example. It's a little bit better. Let's make it so we can see it a little bit better. I'm going to go back to my material here, and we're going to just change this to white here. And I want to say, oh, you can just change the color in here too. So there, you could have, right now I'm passing it through a mask, which is, kind of cool. So I can do like a ladder stitch here. I can go through and just kind of add dots and move these dots around, and it's, again, non-destructive, and I can just change these stitches. Also, what you can do, if you just do a regular fill layer, and then you grab your stitch brush, and then you start clicking, is it this one? Yeah, you grab your stitch brush here, so we want to go, put a stitch here, here, and here, just on a regular fill layer. Now, when we go in here, and I can turn off the visibility of that line, you can't really see the stitches that well, but I can go in here and I can say, well, first, let's crank the size up so we can see it a little bit better. And then let's go into here, and I'm going to switch it from Gosh, give me a little more room here. Stitching. Sorry. Classic to decorative. Blanket stitch, elastic stitch here. Let's go back to our color. We can change the color on the fly. So let's make it white so we can see it. Let's go back here to our spacing. I think that's where the problem is. I need these closer together. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. So here's my stitch, right? And I can always go back here at any point. If I turn this back on, and we can move these stitches around. I can change the size of the stitch here. I can change what type of stitch that I want. If I want to go from decorative to classic, or decorative to, you know, a feather stitch or a bridging stitch or a honeycomb stitch, and again, completely non-destructive, like so. So this is how I would probably end up doing stitches. And again, I can continue, you know, making the stitch here and changing the values and the height and all that good stuff. Whew. Okay. Now I'm starting to remember. So now if we wanted to do, you know, a little mustard stitch or whatever, we can turn that off. And there you go. Stitches. Now in ZBrush, there are stitch brushes here. So if we go into the comma key here and we say brush, LMNOPQRS, stitch brush, and we double click like this one here, you'll see we have an alpha loaded up, so you can create an alpha however you'd like. And then we have a dot stroke here, and then I want to say underneath stroke, the magic of this one is roll is turned on with a roll distance set to 1. This isn't going to use a curve, so we can just go into our stroke here and say curve functions delete. Now when I drag this out, it's going to take this alpha and roll it along. So now you can create stitches. Now obviously you can't change the stitch type or change the height or change the color of the stitches, all that good stuff. But you know, if you're in ZBrush and you want a 3D print, then this is what I would do. So for example, you could just start with a stitch brush and swap this alpha out, or you can like take your standard brush, clone this off, switch here to dot stroke, turn on roll. It's all coming back to me. Stroke. Where is it? Roll distance of 1, and then, oops, we want curve mode off. And then it will just roll. Let's turn that Z intensity way down. There you go. And now we're just rolling that alpha through kind of in a stitch way. And of course you can just swap your alpha out for whatever else that you want. It seems to have something else going on here. I don't know, I have to look at that, but yeah, so that's the basic idea. Or like I said, you can just take that stitch brush, clone it off, and then just swap out these alphas for whatever and just use those settings. That seems to be a little butterier. There we go. And then again, you can hold down Alt, etc. Woo. But again, I think I do have stitch stuff on my channel. I just don't remember where exactly it is. Hey, Rodolfo, how's it going, man? Character, multiple assets go for... If I miss any questions, sorry about that. I'm not trying to miss any here. Oh, grow to apply a bigger polygroup. Yeah, so if you want, speaking of, if you had a polygroup here, and you want to say, you know, Control-Shift-X to expand or Control-Shift-S to shrink. Or if you want to just grab like a piece of this one, you can do Control-Shift-A to visibility grow all, or Control-Shift-Q to visibility grow polygroup. Those will come in handy often. Cool. Creating character. Multiple assets go from ZBrush to Painter, then the character creator. Should I be concerned that ZBrush doesn't recognize Painter UV cuts? Is that a bad thing? ZBrush to Painter. So anybody who wants to follow along with that, I got some decent. So if you go in here to my playlist here, actually go to the home section. There is the Reillusion Character Creator. This is how to take your like ZBrush models. You can go through here and like pose out your ZBrush model really quickly, and then have a library of stuff. I think I have a little intro overview here. Yeah, basically, you can take any ZBrush model you want, send it over there, create bones for it, pose it out, send it back to a plugin library that'll allow you to store those as layers, and then you can kind of just flip through. So there you go. You got a whole library of poses you can save for your character. So if you want, actually, this is probably, it's here. It's, I don't know how easy it's that. Like, here's the Reillusion section. You can check that out. But honestly, on my ArtStation page, I think, let me see. Goodness, why am I not signed in? Come on, man. Sign in. Sure. Yes, please. Thank you. Okay. My profile. If you go here to this tab, so here's the ZBrush What's New. Here's the Reillusion Character Creator stuff, and you can go through here and see a bunch of different projects, and that'll walk you through live streams and stuff where we talk about that. In this case, as far as like going back and forth from ZBrush to Painter and then to Character Creator, ZBrush probably won't, because if you're going to ZBrush to Painter and then Painter is UVing for you and then you're going into Character Creator, ZBrush has no idea that you changed any of its meshes unless you go from Character Creator back to ZBrush. You go Z from Character Creator to ZBrush, then it will update that geometry, I think. But then now I'm starting to wonder, like, does it actually have, will it send over UVs? That I'm not sure. I actually haven't done that use case. It's only a bad thing if it's stopping you from moving forward. But if you're in Character Creator and it's all textured up and you're in Painter and all the UVs are fine and ZBrush doesn't need to know your UVs, then it's probably fine. Alpha, yes, thank you. Sorry about that. ZModeler is Extrude, and QMesh seems like Extrude is just a bad QMesh in their case. Yes, so that's a good question. So when do we want to use QMesh and when do we want to use, let me see if I can find an example here. Let's do spiral. So for example, if I say, well, let's do this. Let's go down here to initialize, and I'm going to say displace. There we go. I'm just going to kind of move these out a little bit. So for example, I'm going to say make Polymesh 3D. And I want to go through here, and I've got, I'm going to hover over an edge. I'm going to say polygroup, polyloop here, like so. And I've got a different polygroup here, and I want to go through. And now if I do QMesh, polygroup all, and I start QMeshing this out, it's going to start sticking to other objects. If you want that functionality, totally fine. If you don't, I would say do extrude, polygroup all, and now it'll just extrude. It's not going to try to stick. So QMesh is awesome if you want to do stuff like this, where you just go through here and say QMesh, polygroup all. You can QMesh this out, and then QMesh this out, and then QMesh this out. I'm trying to, there we go. So QMesh and QMesh and QMesh and QMesh. And then if you want, you can hold down Alt and Paint, and then you can QMesh through, and it'll cut through. It'll kind of auto, merge stuff, so you don't have to go through there and delete and bridge or anything like that. It's totally awesome. You can take this one here and just boop, pop it down. Take this one here, boop, pop it down. Oh, it got a little non-tangent over there, but you can just pull right through, right? Alt tap, pull right through. It works great. However, and also it'll bridge things too. So you can say start QMesh a single poly. As you start pulling over here, it'll want to snap to this, and now you don't have to bridge or merge or anything. It's just automatic. So you can go through here and you can pull this one up, and it'll snap here, and it's all welded together, right? If you like that functionality, great. If you don't, if you're like, stop snapping, I just want to extrude, then I would say just go back here to extrude, and then just say extrude single poly, and now you can just extrude this, you can extrude this, and it's not going to try to snap to anything else. So sometimes QMesh will save you a lot of time, and it's awesome. Sometimes extrude is more what you want. Question, why is my texture splotchy when I make a texture from Polypaint? I've had solid colors in Polypaint, perfect UVs, and I've been unwelding group borders. Well, you're doing all the right stuff. I'll say that. So we go to here to cylinder, make Polymesh 3D. We're going to say, I'm going to group by normals, polygroups group by normals. So now if I go through here and I say, oh, I want to fill this with red color fill object, you're going to get splotchy because basically remember, it's vertex color. So this vertex is red, this vertex is white. There's no verts in between here. So it's just interpolating white to red, and you're getting a very gradient result, right? Now, to your point, if you go over here and you say, well, there's a couple different things you can do. You can pack geometry in here. So if I go through here, for example, say insert multiple edge loops, keep polygroup, and I just put more polygons in there. Now, if I say Control Shift Tap here, fill this with red color, fill object, you'll see this is, all of these stayed white except for this one right here. It's interpolating red to, this one's white, this one's red. It doesn't know what to do here, so it just gives you a little bit of a gradient, but it's more contained because there's more geometry there. Now, to what Gern was saying, you can go through here and we can say we have a, let's undo back. There we go. Group by normals. You can unweld these. So now if we do modify topology, unweld groups border, that's going, it's going to look like they're on top of each other. But if I say like hit D for dynamic, you'll see it'll split these off. So these verts are on top of each other, but they're not related. They're not actually welded. So if I take this one and say color fill object, this, did I undo? I might have undone too much. Unweld groups border, isolate, color, fill object. There we go. Now, since these things aren't actually related, again, if I hit D for dynamic, they're not welded. The red will stop right here because this vertex is red, this vertex is red, and then this is a completely separate object that has a white vert here and a white vert here because these are not actually touching. That should do it. It'll keep it nice and crispy. So you can either pack geometry in here so the interpolation between a one color pixel and another color doesn't have a gradient, or you can unweld the border and it should stay nice and crispy. If it's not, I'm not sure. That I'm not sure, because the splotchiness I'm assuming is coming from like low res interpolation between two different colors, if I'm guessing. Sorry, what's the best way to make futuristic armor pieces placed on shoulders rounded with the same futuristic armor pieces on the shoulders rounded with the same spacing? Probably. I mean, same spacing will be a little bit tricky depending. You might have to just eyeball it and make it feel right. But if you want kind of a cheat here, let's go, not a cheat, but just an option. We'll say demo soldier here, and we'll say grab the body. And I'm going to go down here. We'll say delete lower. So we have X symmetry turned on, and I want to put spaced out geometry on here. You can say, okay, I want it in this shape, so we're going to duplicate him off. Control W to make that a polygroup. Control Shift Tab, geometry modify topology, delete hidden. We'll do a quick deformation polish by feature just to round it out. ZRemesh or halved, tap size down to 0. Nice even quads. And now I have quads that are generally evenly spaced. So you could, there's a couple, you could go in here to Nanomesh. So if you do like a BI brush insert, industrial parts, for example, just take any brush really. Say brush, a couple different ways, but brush, create nanomesh brush, hover over a face. So now we can say insert a nanomesh on all polygons. We'll choose Phillips. So now we can go through here and we can have generally evenly spaced geometry. In fact, keep it proportional. So that way, just, in the middle of these, it'll maintain the same space. But again, these are just instances, so if this is the spacing between them. You can also consider using, we were in here earlier, dynamic. You can turn that on, and then instead of smooth subdivision, you can go in here to Micropoly, and then you can just create your own, Micropoly here. And let's go ahead and say align, rotate here. There we go. So now, and again, you can go in here to scale. Oh yeah, that's just going to scale Z. This is basically replacing every face with an object. Evenly spaced, maybe, maybe not. Again, it's going to be difficult on a rounded object to get perfect quads. And in fact, now that I'm saying all this, I've talked about this before. I want to say like a chainmail. If you want to know more, obviously, like Micropoly we just talked about, Nanomesh we just talked about. There's basic Nanomesh stuff, and then also, I want to say it was like chainmail, because chainmail can be the exact same thing, where essentially it's like, well, if you make chainmail in this pattern, the chainmail is going to kind of get bigger and then smaller and not link up correctly. In that case, you may want to just cut it out of a plane and then just drape it on your object and then delete the faces. That'll keep things nice and quadded. It gets tricky depending on how exact you need to be. Honestly, just manually doing it and eyeballing it and making it look good visually or correct or spaced visually is probably your best bet, but you know, it's a little slower. If that makes sense. Got a really quick question for time. Is there a way to align the camera view to a surface? Yeah, that comes in handy. So if we have you know, let's make it easy. A cube here, make Polymesh 3D, and let's say this cube is all topsy-turvy in space, and we want to sculpt straight down. So Control D a couple times. We want to sculpt straight down on this standard brush. Boy, I messed this one up good, didn't I? You know what? We can always do this. Brush, reset all brushes. There we go. So we have our standard brush here, and we want to look straight down at this face here, but we can't. Hit W, Alt tap on that surface normal, and then hold down Shift and tap on that direction, or that's this thing right here. Shift tap on it. Then hit F to frame if you need to. Let me see. Shift tap. There you go. That'll make the camera look directly at that surface, and then you can go through here and you can just sculpt straight down. Now, of course, if you hold down Shift on your camera, it's going to switch back to, you know, the world axis snapping. Now, this gets a little trickier if it's like, hey, what if that surface is all undulating and rounded? I don't have a surface to snap to. You may have to get creative and, I don't know, at that point, I don't know, maybe keep a version of your cube that's flat. So you can say, hey, I want to sculpt on this cube, but this cube has my easily alt-tappable, shift-clickable, isolatable. So now you can go through here in solo mode and look straight down on that surface. If that makes sense. Is it a problem I have 3 separate objects that are not joined? Overlapping but not joined. No. You might have some weird baking. I don't know. It might bake a little weird, maybe. But and also if it's going to be weighted to an object, then those aren't joined when it's painting weights. If those weights aren't exactly the same on both verts that are overlapping, they'll start to separate as the object animates. So that's problematic. But if you're careful with your weighting and your bakes are fine, then yeah, it shouldn't be, I don't know, shouldn't be terrible. I prefer to have things welded if I can, but that's kind of personal preference. But yeah, that's it. Thanks everybody. It's ooh, we went 30 minutes over. Hopefully that was fun, and I'll catch y'all on the flip side. Take it easy and have a good rest of your day.